Đâu, cô chỉ vào đấy đấy, cô vào sai rồi, cô dí vào đấy để cháu xem nào.
Đây nha, cô lấy lại cho nha.
Không, bây giờ cô dí vào đấy để dí, cô quay màn hình.
Đây.
Không, quay vào màn hình của cô ơi, cháu nhìn thấy mặt cô thì cháu mới biết nào mà chỉ. Ôi giời. Đấy. Bây giờ cháu chỉ nhìn thấy mặt cô thôi này.
Dr. Annie, Dr. Elisabeth, Dr. Cynthia, kindly allow us another 5 minutes because the attendees are slowly trickling in.
We understand. It's okay.
Can I just check that you hear me while we're waiting?
Yes, Dr. Elisabeth, yes.
Thank you. So can I see the order? Who will go first?
Can I show my screen?
Yes.
Because I will be moderating. So, okay. So this will be for the first session. Yeah. So I'm sorry. So here we go. So
Good. Good morning.
Good morning.
Recording in progress.
So we will start now. Okay. Arun Susday, Minglaba, Xin chào, Sabaydi, Sawadika, Magandang Umaga. Selamat pagi, Malaysia, Indonesia. Very good morning to everyone. Thank you for making your time available to attend the session today, to the panelists and also to the participants, to the moderators and all. Before we go into the panel sessions, kindly allow me to share with you a recap of what happened yesterday, so that it will also inform both the panelists and attendees on some of the key points that we have captured during the intense discussion that took place yesterday, day one. So I will now move on to share the screen. Okay, so what did we cover? We had a keynote by 3 distinguished keynote speakers from, and also panel session, 2 panel sessions, a workshop and a fireside talk. Actually, this last session was more of an outreach to the youth to engage in mainstream discussion on gender equality, social inclusion, and agro-biodiversity. So the keynote was given by Ms. Clarissa Arida on behalf of Dr. Teresa Mundita Lim, from who is the Executive Director of the ASEAN Center for Biodiversity. Our key partner, supporter, and Mr. Niall O'Connor from SEI Asia Center Director, and Dr. Che Bun Panosai, who is the DG or Director General of NAFRI. Moderated session by Professor Dr. Norida Mazlan from University Putra, Malaysia. Panelists include Ms. Femi from NTFP, Mr. Bilas from AsiaDRA, Ms. Ai Min, representative of Asia Indigenous Peoples Pact, Ms. Lee Shin Shin, who is the National Coordinator in Malaysia for the GF Small Grants Program, Ms. Andy Sowan Pakdi from Pakau Lao, Agro-biodiversity Platform, and also the fireside talk moderated by Ms. Sumarni Laman from Restoration Stewards of Global Landscapes Forum. The key takeaways from panel session 1, of course, we are well aware, and it has been reiterated, ASEAN as being one hosting some of the most mega biologically diverse countries or hotspots, including Philippines, Indonesia, and Malaysia. And this is increasingly under threat. And protection of this revolves around land tenure, scaling up indigenous and traditional food systems, knowledge and practices, respect, being accorded the respect to, and also the protection of this, and market linkages to scale up complementary livelihood. And also that one of the key takeaways is also that although the indigenous people, they are diverse, and rural women, the needs of rural women and indigenous women are diverse, but collective voice will build solidarity to influence policies to protect indigenous knowledge systems and practices. One aspect that we can also try to influence is also to the draft of the ASEAN Guidelines on customary tenure to tenure recognition in one thing that we need to watch out is also the 0 draft stage of this ASEAN Guideline on customary tenure. This is still in draft stage, and everyone who has interest in this, to invite them to also participate in the development of this draft. And for the second session, we also see, in the panel session 1, monoculture and intensive farming, intensive agriculture, input dependent fuels and all that are further aggravating agrobiodiversity loss. And this is compounded by impact of climate change. And again, the recognition and support for family farmers as key food security and protection for agrobiodiversity for livelihoods. This one was also brought up by our keynote address from SEI. Watch out for ASEAN Master Plan for Rural Development, because this master plan is cross-cutting across the 3 ASEAN economic community pillars: political, social, and economy. During the discussions for panel 1, the key points is collective voice and solidarity build could actually scale up representation of indigenous women and rural women's interests at a policy level, at national and also regional level. Documentation, another aspect that needs to be improved to ensure that this intergenerational, that means knowledge that been handed through the generation among the community, can be documented and also protected. This issue, it's in bold because it was raised by both panel session panelists. Capacity building, livelihood to scale, to build resilience and strengthen self-determination, strengthen organizational capacity to form the collective voice. Good initiatives, but need to further strengthen gender mainstreaming in agriculture and agrobiodiversity. This is, although there are a lot of initiatives, but still there are gaps that need to be addressed, especially policy gaps, and also to scale up complementary livelihood to support in support of conservation of agrobiodiversity and also biodiversity in general. For panel 2, we had a representative from Indigenous group. It was stressed that agrobiodiversity influence every aspect of Indigenous communities' lives, from food, rituals, medicine, cultural identity. And again, these are threats of threats to this actually affects food, rituals, medicine, the whole lifestyle and customs and culture. So again, there was reiteration, emphasis on the respect and recognition of land and collective customary rights of women through statutory and also customary system. And there was a sharing on strengthening of complementary livelihood capacity in Aka tribe in Chiang Rai, which we can provide the link for in the report. Right. The UNDP SGP example of strengthening complementary and supplementary livelihood, food production, pineapple, they have a diverse rice varieties, home garden and crafts. So this knowledge has been transferred, skills and practices among community members and to the next generation. Ownership promotes restoration, rehabilitation and conservation of natural resources. Key example is the no-touch zone. This land tenure complementary livelihood will support self-determination and strengthen collective voice. There also need to be additional guidelines and targeted capacity building according to the needs of indigenous communities, women in these communities, and also rural communities. For the Agro-biodiversity platform of Pakao, what came out was the importance of documenting agrobiodiversity to safeguard native species and promote participatory land use planning, and also to strengthen community livelihood. And this these kinds of initiative is also undertaken by Asia Indigenous Peoples Pact and also Friends of the Earth publications in Malaysia. And one thing that they foresee through the Agrobiodiversity platform of Pakaulau is the next step will be an outreach to researchers. And there was interest among the attendees to actually engage with Pakaulau and the potential to scale up research in this area. And also the recognition and respect for Indigenous and rural women knowledge system and practices through laws and policies, and also to inform policies, scale up documentation, conservation, and capacity building. During the workshop, what came out, we tried to capture this as much as possible. We hope this represents the discussion. At the policy level, that we need to address, this is not only for, I mean, this is for Indigenous women and Indigenous groups and rural communities. Land tenure and rights need to be addressed, the issues with regards to this, because one thing that came out from the discussion is they are considered as stewards, that they have the right to use but not to own. So this actually demotivates how you say the conservation practices, because when the state or the province or the government decides to develop the land and then they are relocated to somewhere else and losing all those years of generation of efforts that they have put into protecting that area or that territory. Crop insurance was something that was just mentioned, but we can probably how we say further look into this, because this is one form of building climate resilience and also adaptation strategies for vulnerable communities, especially women in these communities. Collective rights, although this is actually, we can elaborate on this, because there are some difference in the rights of women, even within the Indigenous communities. Some are patriarchal, some are matriarchal, but the collective rights could address to some extent the issues related to disparity or the gaps in women's gender equality and social inclusion, this aspect. There needs to be recognition and therefore respect subsequently of women's role and rights on agrobiodiversity, leading to involvement in policy formulation at probably beginning at the community level. What came out during the discussion is in Lao PDR, they can influence community level policies to some extent, even controlling or controlling a pool of fund that they can access to further improve their livelihood. So this is one example. Again, complementary livelihood to supplement their income when they cannot probably depend on agriculture or agri-food livelihood. Collective voice and leadership will enhance or strengthen self-determination, and therefore to form solidarity so that the voice can be heard and influence national and regional policy. When there are also examples when women get together at the rural communities, they exchange ideas and innovative practices, which can lead to community level benefit sharing. On capacity building, basically on knowledge on conservation and promotion of agrobiodiversity. A lot of our panelists have shared activities on gender equality and social inclusions in terms of livelihood, and they do incorporate agrobiodiversity elements, but they do not really know that it is what they are addressing. So the knowledge on agrobiodiversity can be further scaled up, the awareness. And for data and research, again, respect for customary protocol. This discussion, we noticed that not all knowledge is willingly shared or by indigenous communities. So during this documentation and data and research, we need to respect the need and acknowledge there are customary protocols of for documentation of indigenous knowledge system and practices. Again, on the role of women when documenting, because often they are how do you say, lumped together as indigenous community, but there's no distinction on what is the impact of women in safeguarding agrobiodiversity in indigenous community and rural communities. Okay, so for consideration to mainstream agrobiodiversity, gender equality within indigenous community, when we address this, there needs to be acknowledge that there are some nuances or some dynamics within the indigenous community, especially when it's patriarchal or matriarchal. Collective rights to land tenure, often male counterpart decides what to do with the land. So we also need to consider this aspect. Customary land, they are stewards, not owners. So this also need to be considered when we engage in improving the situation on gender equality and social inclusion for agrobiodiversity. For the youth, there was a discussion here on traditional medicine and agrobiodiversity. First, we address the concerns with regard to with regards to the use of traditional medicine in indigenous community and also rural communities. And the youth, during the discussion, it came out there are concerns about safety because this medicine or this traditional treatment lacks formal recognition. Therefore, there are concerns with safety. There are concerns with the misuse, and also they also know that there is risk of this knowledge being lost because of formal education when they go out to get formal education and formal employment, and there is a gap in terms of intergenerational transfer of this knowledge. Probable measures, there was some good practice shared by from our representative from Nepal on Green School program. Also intervention to suggest if we could probably elevate the importance of this knowledge through formal education, that could also be explored, or through informal education, for example, school programs, extracurricular programs. And throughout this discussion, I think it appeared that needs to be a safe space to facilitate free discussions among youth in the region to address the concerns about their future with regards to food security, agrobiodiversity, and gender. So that's it, everyone. So I did make good of the 15 minutes. Hopefully I will try to provide some inputs. But participants from yesterday are also here today, so we can engage their inputs as well. So now I would like to invite Dr. Anni, Mitin. Hold on, we are having this problem. Okay, may I invite Dr. Anni Mitin, who will moderate the next session. She currently serves as the advisor of the Malaysian Agroecology Society for Sustainable Resource Intensification, or SRIMAS. Her previous held position includes Anni has helmed the Southeast Asian Council for Food Security and Fair Trade for many years. She has also served as a consultant for various regional projects, including areas of food security, agroecology, sustainable consumption, production, and also consumer protection. However, fair trade practices in agriculture and food security remains a subject very close to her heart. And I know that in person. All right, so Anni is also trained in bacteriology and medical microbiology. So yes, so here, Anni, I hand over the Zoom platform to you.
Thank you, Ratna. Thank you, Ratna. Thank you, Mekong Institute, and all the organizers that is supporting this initiative. This has been this is the second day, and yesterday I really learned a lot from our participant. And may I just share my screen? Yeah. So this is what is going to happen today. So today, the second day, we will be talking about mainstreaming agrobiodiversity for sustainable food system in the ASEAN region, and specific emphasis looking at the theme, how we are going to harness the benefits of agrobiodiversity to build sustainable, resilient, and inclusive food system. So we have 3 specific panel sessions that will look at this area, where today we will really dive in to look at the role of Indigenous women and rural communities in advancing agrobiodiversity. I just would like to recap in terms of the purpose of this event. There are 3 objectives that this event would like to accomplish. First is to strengthen the understanding among regional policy bodies and organizations on the impact of agrobiodiversity laws on food security of women and indigenous communities. Secondly is to understand to strengthen our understanding on the specific role of women and indigenous communities as custodians of agrobiodiversity and advancing the IG targets, especially target 14 and 18. And the third one is to enable the organizers, especially Mekong Institute, to also consolidate our recommendation, which will be surfacing during the event for regional policy bodies, and looking at deeper into the role of these indigenous women and rural communities in advancing mainstreaming agrobiodiversity, which is considered as a highly valuable national treasures or sovereign asset to many of our nation. For this, we have 3 panel sessions, yeah, so that we can really look at the event emphasizing on mainstreaming agrobiodiversity through the lenses of gender equality and social inclusion, so that we can see how we could enhance the resilience of their food systems, of the women and rural communities, the indigenous communities, their livelihood through conservation of traditional knowledge, cultural practices, and food tradition, providing space for their food sovereignty through self-determination, and providing stable and direct access to safe and nutritious food to ensure food security. The rural and indigenous women have been custodians of traditional knowledge and practices through continuing use of certain species in agriculture, and preparing forgotten food at their homes in keeping with their culture and food tradition that ensure their family members have access to this safe and nutritious food. Let us not forget about the importance of traditional knowledge in maintaining agrobiodiversity in food preparation and processing, such as when food is processed through fermentation, knowledge about the type of microorganisms that make our fermented fish and meat and tempeh. Yeah, these women, they understand the synergies of organisms that work with the ingredient and local produce in their food system, including the use of banana leaf and bamboo to cook food. I am myself is an indigenous person from the Dayak community, the Bidayo on Borneo. So these women have tremendous contribution in protection of agrobiodiversity, but their contribution are often not visible to policymakers and implementers, and easily missed in agrobiodiversity would increase the recognition of women's role, especially indigenous group, in advancing IG target, especially target 14 and 18 on recognizing women as primary land and natural resource managers and respecting and integrating their traditional knowledge. So let us get into the panel session. So we have 3 lineup today, as you can see on the screen. We have session 1 about mainstreaming agrobiodiversity on gender equality and social inclusion. The second session, we will look at indigenous and rural women of Southeast Asia as custodians of biodiversity. And the third one is on women as drivers as sustainable diet and agrobiodiversity. I will be moderating all the sessions, so I hope you all will stay with me throughout the session as well. So the first session, we will have the panel on mainstreaming. So each session we will have about one and a half hour, yeah. And today, this first session will really look at gender dimension. The 3 speakers have extensive experience in promoting and strengthening gender equality and social inclusion in policies and action. So the purpose of this first session is to look at and to identify challenges and key considerations specific to the needs of indigenous and rural women with regards to food security and livelihood through strengthening community and agrobiodiversity. Okay, so before I call on our first speaker, I would like to remind ourselves that we will have 10 to 15 minute presentation, yeah, and I will introduce each speaker before, and then the Q&A will be at after all the 3 presenters have completed their presentation, and then we will address the Q&A. Just a reminder as well, I hope I myself speak as slow as possible because we have ongoing translation, and also we have our rapporteurs who are taking notes. So I would really hope that we can cooperate towards that. Okay, so let me now call upon our first speaker. Yeah, just one moment. Our first speaker today is Dr. Elisabeth Simelton, and she is one of the really leading climate change scientists based at the World Agroforestry or ICRAF in Hanoi since 2010. She has been there, yeah, and she has over 25 years of experience from Southeast Asia. And she is Swedish by national, but I think now she is very much Vietnamese, I guess, after sitting there for 10 years. I think it's really, we are so grateful to have you joining this session. She has a PhD in geography from Gothenburg University of Sweden. Her research interest is really towards looking at smallholders farmers, and looking at adaptive strategies to climate change, and really an expert in developing gender-sensitive participatory methods. That's why this session is really looking at specifically gender dimension. So Elisabeth enjoy a lot of, working with community level, practical issues contribute. We can see that she's contributing a lot to policies at regional level as well, including the ASEAN Guidelines for agroforestry development and the technical manual on ASEAN rice and agroforestry landscape with FAO and ICRAF. So with that, Elisabeth, may I pass the screen to you? So please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that welcome. I think you upgraded a little bit on a couple of my bio. So let me first start to share the screen. And while I do that, I just want to say I'm very sorry that I could not join yesterday. And it seems like you had a very fruitful discussion. Now let's see. So are you now seeing my full screen or the one with notes?
The one with the second, yeah, with notes, with the second slide. So can you put that? Yeah.
This is why that is. Let me try to find the.
Where is this?
Oh, no, it's just black instead.
Dr. Elisabeth, you have to choose display settings on your screen.
Yes, I'm trying to find it, but it's hidden. Now I don't know what you're watching at all. Are you seeing? No, you're not seeing anything now. Let's see, we'll try again.
Perfect.
Yes, okay. So thank you so much for the introduction and good morning, everybody. I will just thank so much for having the opportunity, first of all, to come and talk and join some of the sessions today. Today, I will talk about gender inclusion and why it matters for agrobiodiversity. And I just want to recognize some of my team as well in Vietnam, in particular, from ICRAF and CIRAD and CARE as well, who we work closely with. So first, I would just like to share a little bit about the ASEAN Guidelines for Agroforestry Development, which you mentioned in the introduction. They were endorsed in 2018 by the ASEAN ministers on agriculture and forestry, and it has 14 principles over 16 topics. And many of these actually overlap also with the IKI targets. I just wanted to raise that. And specifically, this principle 9 here speaks about gender equity and social inclusion. And for my talk today, I will talk a little bit why gender matters. I also would like to draw your attention to this guideline 9.3, which ensures that marginalized groups benefit from and are not adversely affected by large-scale corporate agroforestry investments. So for those of you who have been following the COP meetings from Glasgow, we are trying now to connect the dots over to the Biodiversity Convention that's upcoming next year. You may have seen billions of dollars being pledged to plant trees to save the climate and for other reasons. While if we look at this type of landscape on the left-hand side, we can of course see that reforestation is important. More importantly, something that is called landscape restoration, more to the side, onto the right-hand side picture where people live in harmony with nature and the kind of investments. And now there is concern that these carbon offsets would result in large monoculture plantations where big investors investing their own interpretations of established principles to maximize the carbon per hectare that's sequestered and so on in the fastest possible way. So how can we ensure that this process is participatory and respects tenure rights, local knowledge, and biodiversity, as is mentioned in these ASEAN guidelines on agroforestry, but also these other developments of new guidelines on biodiversity, which you have mentioned. So with the next few slides, I would like to give 2 examples of what happens when we ask women and men on the ground what what matters for them. So the first example here is when we ask them what trees they prefer and what lies behind those preferences. This is an example from Northwest Vietnam with indigenous people and an example of Arabica coffee farmers. This is how they reason about what trees they would find suitable for coffee-based agroforestry. Just as an example of the methodology as well of the crops. We're not proposing coffee agroforestry-based systems everywhere. This is 106 farmers who have been shortlisted individually among a long list of tree species, 13 criteria for why they select trees. And the first obvious point, of course, that I want to make is for farmers, just like for most of us, the economic returns are a key priority for both women and men. But with this picture, I just want to show that if we had asked men only, we may have ended up with a smaller list of tree species, first of all. Why is that? Well, in this case, women consider many more values of trees, which means that we can also add a longer list of potential trees to include in the systems, in the agroforestry systems that they would like. Here, one of the reasons for that is because women also consider labor inputs in a much more diverse way, as they also have other activities to tend to that they don't have technical assistance like vehicles or electronic equipments to do. And so for me, the selections in this result, this is the starting point really for when we talk about trees and understanding what they would want and what they see in the roles of these trees behind the wishes that they need. So this is not the end result, this is the beginning. And I also want to say that women are not only, it's not always that we will find women giving the opportunity to find more trees. It could well be the opposite, but it's why we need to ask both women and men, and also older and younger people, because they also will have different knowledge and interest in different trees. Sorry, I just lost my notes here. So they do the tasks differently. This is one of the reasons. And so you will see that women here pay a lot of attention to the labor inputs, but they also look at what they see when they stay on the farm. So we know from many households in Vietnam, and I think also Laos and Cambodia in particular, we have one of the adults in the household who's going away for an off-farm work. This means they can bring back money to the household, but also it makes recovering after disasters, natural disasters, a time-consuming activity that risks putting the one who's the single-headed person left back home in a vicious recovery circle. So we have found in another study, not this one, that home gardens also can be a hotspot for biodiversity, and that is also red listed trees that are valuable trees that we don't find anymore in the nature. And so that was during a time when at least in Vietnam, the home gardens were quite unregulated and more of an experiment site for farmers. Now there's lots of home garden policies coming up with political policy support, economic, financial support, which means a few models, and farmers would select those. So there's less of the experimentation going. The other side of that is during COVID, we have seen that home gardens actually have become a food security system for these homecoming migrants who had to come back when they lost their jobs in the cities. So this is the many aspects of a home garden and keeping it diverse. Another example relating also to the disaster is when we talk about agroclimate information services. This is a great tool to help farmers adapt in the short and the long term. Here we have just made 6 different designs of the same kind of weather forecast information. We learned that when we ask women and men, for the first thing, they don't pick the design that we thought they would. Of course, that's very interesting. The second one was that women prefer the one with lots of text or more text, because then the children could read to them. while they were doing something else in the kitchen, for example. We were also then able to come up with one of the designs that actually was a medium in between that both women and men could use, and that also has helped them to come up with good planning. And they then share this in social media groups. And these are quasi-digital, half-digital advisories that are developed together with the local extension and in consultation with local policymakers. And thanks to that, they are now also published on official websites and shared in the farmers' networks. We do this with gender-aware facilitators who also understand when it's time to have gender-segregated groups and when it's better to have mixed groups. This is it can vary across the country even. There is no simple rule for that. And they can share and learn a lot from each other, very important. So these agro advisories are also very useful tools when we work in projects to glue together farmers who are from the core beneficiaries of a project and with the ones who are the non-direct beneficiaries, for example, so they can share. But with this regard, I just want to contrast those farmer-made agro-advisories with a range of digital apps that are exploding on the market now. And digital apps is another $1 million industry, really. This information, so when a farmer would select an app that is useful for them, there's very little information available. And we try to review some of the apps that are related for farmers in Southeast Asia. And we see that farmers are quite invisible in the development of these apps, that governments also have been very little included in the process to develop the apps. And at best, they have a few % of the project funds. So they are also left outside of this. And lastly, these apps that we have looked at are only for monoculture plantations. So they come with a blanket, often a water and input advice. So that means we could not find much evidence for that these apps are actually contributing to meet government's targets on either the biodiversity or the SDGs that we have listed here. And in fact, we even question whether these governments are aware of the app's existence and what would happen if farmers actually found the apps and used them. What would be the consequences then on natural resources and environmental resources? So in the paper that is listed here, we have put some recommendations on apps and also on data sharing, which is another quite sensitive issue. So to finalize my talk, we have guidelines, we have tools, we have evidence, but there's little progress being made still. And so I actually would like to leave with a question rather than a conclusion. What is it that we can do better? Do we need to be smarter in evaluating the benefits from agrobiodiversity? How can we demonstrate that monoculture is a cost and multifunctional land use is a benefit? We need to do more really than comparing the economic terms of yield per hectare. And we need to assess also the avoided loss and damage thanks to diverse land uses in terms of avoided costs for recovery, for example. This is a challenge for this decade or even longer ahead, but really for the next 10 years in particular, that we are trying to focus on in some of the work we are doing in a few new projects. And I'll be happy to share more about that later, or you feel free to contact me for more information or discussion. But this is how I would like to end this talk. And I have I will share these slides with you. So there's more information at the end here with some of videos from our work, and also that was the references as well to the presentation, to the work that I was sharing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elisabeth. Wow, there's a lot that you have done, and I think it is really interesting for me to see, how women are brought into the process, the participatory process to build into this guideline, the ASEAN Agroforestry Guideline. I would not have thought that, women would consider more trees than men in selecting what trees they would like to have in your the reforestation strategy. I think this is a very crucial element that often that we will not think that women have different looking at also the labor value side, because they know what is going into that kind of activities. And to also look at their role to continue the work when family members go off farm, and they stay to take care of what is left behind. And it is also interesting to see that home gardening is taking place and being actually mainstream in rural community as well, pushed through policies and implemented through. And also to note the preferences on agroclimate information, that women prefer less graphic, more text, and it is important to see that they bring in new generation, their children, to be involved in taking care of this knowledge as well. I think this is very, very crucial. With that, I will stop here first. Later, we will come back. So any question that that the participant have, please use the Q&A box to post, and then we will bring the panel back together for Q&A. Thank you, Elisabeth. Very, very enlightening. Thank you. So next, I would call our second speaker. Second speaker, we have Dr. Cynthia McDougall. Cynthia, are you here?
I am here, Annie.
Yes, hi Cynthia.
Hello, everyone.
Hi. So Cynthia is, one moment, let me, okay, I need to enlarge my screen to see. She is social scientist, and again, we are diving into gender, social equity, and social inclusion. And looking at, you've been working on natural resource governance and food system research with the world fish side, for a number of years. And this is very important to see how you bring in your inter-transdisciplinary research and participatory action research into policy, and also going putting in specific factors or indicators to see how gender are being put in. Dr. McDougall holds a bachelor degree in political science and development studies from Trent University in Canada, with a Master of Philosophy in Geography from Cambridge University in the UK, and PhD on Knowledge, Technology and Innovation from the Wageningen University, the Netherlands. It's so nice, and we are so pleased to have you. She is now the Senior Research Fellow with SEI, who is also our our funder for this project. Thank you and welcome to the session. And with that, I would like to pass the screen to you. Please, Cynthia.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Annie. Can you see my screen and can you hear me okay?
Yes, all good.
Terrific. That's great. So thanks again and welcome everyone. And I'm delighted to be here. It sounds like yesterday was tremendously exciting. And as I listened to the wonderful recap, I could hear, I think some of the things that I'm going to highlight actually resonate a lot with what was said yesterday. And amazingly, Elisabeth and I did not plan this, but I think you'll see that a great deal of what she said actually flows right into what I'm going to share as well. So I think that's terrific. I was asked to reflect a little bit on considerations for agrobiodiversity and gender integration. And so I'm going to highlight three big ideas, three big considerations, and those are choice, voice, and underlying barriers. And so let me just see, it's not quite turning the page here. There we go. So these are the three considerations. Choice and voice, for anyone who's involved in gender research or the field of gender and social equality and integration, you'll recognize those as being associated as key features or elements of women's empowerment. And so, of course, when we look at these in agrobiodiversity and gender equality and social integration or inclusion, we think of amplifying these. The third point I'm going to highlight is actually one that we want to address or reduce, and its underlying constraints could be from the household level to all the way through to markets, states, and society. And it includes very often invisible or hidden barriers, including norms. So the way society says how women should be, how men should be, who should be what kind of work is appropriate. So let me jump right in first with choice. And when in the field of gender, when we think of choice, we actually talk about strategic freedoms, big decisions like education or marriage, so relating to child marriage, as you can see, these big strategic freedoms, and that's exactly right and important. But in this case, I think there's an element of choice that we can apply when we think about agrobiodiversity, and it's exactly what Elisabeth was flagging as well. It's that we have, she highlighted forest, reforestation investments and climate systems, but we also have seed systems booming, species and genetic improvement programs booming. And so the question is, how much choice do women and men have? How much choice do different groups of people have in this area? And choice here, so it's practical, but the argument is it has to be meaningful. And here's this picture that I used as the cover slide. And I imagine people were thinking, that's a funny choice of picture for a gender slide. The reason I chose it was that the problem to date that I've seen in watching seed systems boom and genetic improvement and breeding systems boom is that, exactly as Elisabeth flagged, there is a gender blindness that often occurs in relation to assessing needs and preferences. These systems or services often unintentionally focus on men's needs, assuming that people's needs are all the same. But we know that, in fact, from looking at this through the CG and elsewhere, in fact, men's needs may be, and the improvements that come out of programs that focus on men's needs may be very related to intensification, commercially oriented production. And so it looks like there is perhaps gender hierarchies and even species hierarchies or diversity hierarchies that are sort of intertwined, right? Is this gender blindness actually reinforcing a narrowing of diversity? And so in terms of ways forward around choice, an incredibly important pathway to have in our minds is to think about generating meaningful choice for women in innovation and breeding programs and seed systems. And so this means equitably and explicitly assessing needs and priorities of women, especially women who have been underserved or under-recognized in these systems, including Indigenous women, economically poor women. There's been a growth of tools to help do that, and I've included the link here. And what this can also help do is it can really tease out also what are features and characteristics of significance in seeds or in fish species where I was, that are particularly important for nutrition and for multiple uses and for subsistence uses. And the second part of choice that I wanted to underscore is that we cannot make good choice or even have meaningful choice if we don't have a foundation of knowledge. And as I think was underscored probably yesterday, this important knowledge of species and biodiversity, agrobiodiversity, traditional knowledges are disappearing. And so a way forward is around capacity investments in women, men, and especially youth, as was highlighted yesterday, that celebrates, preserves, shares local, traditional, and diverse knowledges, cultures, and skills. And it can do this in a lot of different ways. And I think it can also amplify some of these intergenerational connections that can be so important. So let me jump into the second point now, which is voice. And in the world of gender research, we think of voice as the capacity of women and girls to speak up and be heard and to shape discussions and decisions that affect their lives, could be all the way from the household through to the state, so at many scales. if we say, okay, what does this mean when we're thinking about agrobiodiversity? A couple of ways forward jumped out at me when I was thinking about today. And that was that capacities, of course, are incredibly important, and building capacities of rural and Indigenous women to voice demands for change, or to voice demands to voice resistance to change, including through associations and networks, incredibly important. But the line I've put here in italics is the part of this equation that often gets missed. And it's not just about women being able to voice their demands, it's about men and more powerful actors being able to hear. There are two sides to this conversation, there has to be. And so people must be able to demand and listen and respond. And so the second and third points actually relate to some of what I heard reflected from yesterday, and that is really focusing and amplifying dialogues around securing local tenure right in their many different forms. Some of the nuance of that came up in the recap, as well as right to food policy implementation, I think could be an important piece of this puzzle. And when we think about research that feeds into these policies and programs, I think this is the time that it's incredibly important to switch from research questions being set by researchers, by funders, to looking at what are the demand-driven research areas? What do women, in particular rural and Indigenous women, need answered through research? How does participatory and participatory action research fit in? So it in itself answers the right questions and can also even build adaptive capacities through the process of doing research collaboratively. And of course, policies and programs, anything that flows out of this area and that drives agrobiodiversity, I think Elisabeth also reinforced this, the processes themselves need to be gender equitable and socially inclusive. And so this could be around reforestation processes. It could be at the project level, deciding what to invest in, what to protect. So let me move now to the third area, and that is hidden barriers. So I'm sure many people here have seen good ideas, strategies, programs, projects, policies, that actually the more we probe and the better data we get, the better monitoring data we get, we see that they're actually limited in the results, or they even fail, or they appear to, let's say, be empowering for the project duration, but then they recoil and the results undo after the project. What we're learning the more we probe into why is this is because sometimes these strategies, programs focus on women only, or they focus on change and capacities at the level of individuals, as if we were just a bunch of individuals operating entirely loosely and freely. But in fact, what's happening is that individual behavior, we know, is constrained by what we call social structures or social systems, including these norms, which again, this is what society tells us how women should be, how men should be, and unequal power relations. And I use this picture because in many contexts where I've worked, we see men are positioned by society as the leaders and women as the followers, men as the farmers, women as the helpers, men as the innovators, women as just the nurturers or caregivers. And in Bangladesh, for example, in relation to agrobiodiversity, we saw a wonderful project where women had access to small indigenous fish, and they even had the technology they needed to harvest them, but they could not advance and do that because of social norms in that context that made it not okay for women to use technology, for women to catch fish, because this was all seen as men's work. The outcome, of course, I mean, it's poor for agrobiodiversity because then the fish go unrecognized, but also it's poor for nutrition, in particular the nutrition of most vulnerable groups, including children. So ways forward around these hidden barriers, this is a huge and growing field, but just very quickly, we can start to shift our gaze as we work in this area from women only to what we call gender transformative approaches. And here, this nice visual that I borrowed from a collaboration with CARE. Instead of focusing only on empowering or benefiting or reaching women, what we call above the waterline strategies, we can focus where we call below the waterline. Look at what are values about who is more important, the unsaid things. Look at the norms that constrain women from fully engaging, that constrain men from listening to women, for example, that constrain men from caregiving and women from being decision makers in public spaces. And so that's my last point, is I'd suggest that we can start to challenge ourselves to address these under the waterline societal constraints. We can engage men and women together in understanding how do these social rules affect everyone, including children, including agrobiodiversity, including nutrition outcomes. And we can engage men as well as women from local to national scales as champions and role models. And so I'll end here. I just wanted to show again choice, voice for amplifying underlying constraints for really addressing in creative ways. And I'll stop here. And if anybody wants the resources I shared, I'm happy to pass those on. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cynthia. Yes, this is really, I think, when we bring in the cultural elements, you know, and especially here we talk about traditional knowledge and you know, the role that women are playing in the family unit and in the community. I think how they interact is very, very crucial. And aspect of stereotyping and gender role, yeah, this is coming into interplay with this. And you know, it is very succinctly put that we really need to look at the three aspects that you mentioned. Generating, you know, really meaningful choices. How do we bring this forward and look at, listen to their voice? How do we bring their voice, especially looking at research and development? And, you know, sometimes, you know, we see that they are just subject or samples to our research, yeah, and they are not playing the role in looking at this data formulation. And of course, addressing the hidden barriers. I think with that, I really thank you for your presentation, and you know, we will discuss more about this later. And thank you so much for enlightening me in this process. Really, thank you. Yeah,
Pleasure.
yeah. Thank you so much. So next, our next speaker is Ms.Jariya Sornkliang. Are we ready, Jariya?
Yes, I'm ready.
Very good. So Jariya will also look at, we will continue to look at gender dimension. And she has been working, she is currently the project manager at Southeast Asian Fisheries Development Center, or SEAFDEC. And she will look at gender dimension in the value chain of small-scale fisheries and aquaculture in Southeast Asia. So she looked at how the project aim to improve and strengthen gender dimension in small-scale fisheries and aquaculture. Another key important aspect of agrobiodiversity in aquatic side. We will listen to how the key input from this project will also contribute to data essential for official fisheries statistics to influence appropriate, equitable, effective, and targeted interventions. I really look forward to how the output of the project that will continue to serve as a guide in formulating and revising local and national fisheries policy. With that, Cynthia, with that, Jariya, I call you Jariya, yes?
Yes,
Jariya.
Yeah.
Yeah, may I pass
name.
the screen to you for your presentation? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me share my screen first. Okay. So, thank you very much, our moderator. First of all, I would like to say thank you for Mekong Institute for inviting SEAFDEC to join this event. Today, I'm going to show you SEAFDEC gender strategy and our implementation. This is my topic for today. Because of SEAFDEC recognize that in sharing roles of women and men in fisheries and in our household are important for engagement, fisher and stakeholders in fishery management for sustainable development. Therefore, SEAFDEC have created the gender strategy through the series of our interdepartmental meeting, and it was endorsed in our council meeting in 2019. Our gender strategy was developed to facilitate gender mainstreaming at all levels of the organization and serve as an organization overreach framework to facilitate SEAFDEC's efforts to integrating gender in its program, project, and activities. The SEAFDEC gender strategy is also intended to subsequent support the integration of gender perspective in fisheries and aquaculture in the member country of SEAFDEC. Here is the five item of our SEAFDEC gender strategy. The first one is mainstreaming gender at all levels of the organization, and the second one is integration gender in SEAFDEC programs and projects. The third one is incorporating gender perspectives in all events organized by SEAFDEC. Number 4 is boosting the visibility of SEAFDEC as a gender responsive and gender sensitive organization. And the last one is strengthen further the cooperation and collaboration with member country and other organizations on gender aspect. Related to the SEAFDEC gender strategy to initiate SEAFDEC work related to gender issue. Therefore, SEAFDEC have focused working on gender integration in fishery by starting with gender analysis in fishing community. Sorry. Let's see what we have done to respond to the SEAFDEC gender strategy for our member country. SEAFDEC with supporting fund from the government of Sweden and our partner with IUCN, MFF, and Stockholm. You already know SEI jointly conduct the regional gender study in Southeast Asia, South and Southeast Asia in 2007 and 18. SEAFDEC, I will show you the result of SEAFDEC responsible, but actually we conducted 12 countries in South and Southeast Asia. For SEAFDEC, we conducted gender study in Gap, Cambodia, Koh Tao, Myanmar, and Trat, Thailand, where the sites chosen are close to border province. The aim of this in-depth research to understand the state of women and men in fishery value chain and generate information on current gender-related difference in relation to fishery resources management. Here is the study result. We pick up the result that 3 areas have the same finding result. While both men and women are involving in various activities related to fisher, venturing into the sea to do fishing is a male domain. Women support men in their fishing endeavor at sea by doing onshore activities such as cleaning nets and vessels, cleaning and segregating the catch, mending fishing gear, processing and marketing the catch. Women have less participation in this decision-making on fishing and property like land ownership and both, because in our society, the house leader is always the man. We make better decision, who are making better decision. Therefore, there is a need to make women develop confident to be involved in decision-making in household matter by emphasizing that women too are responsible and are also important in fishery. So the next project for the gender related to gender, we are still working on the gender analysis because we are thinking that gender analysis is very important information to understand the community context, especially in fishing context. So we try to cover more area of our gender analysis study. We get the fund from FAO project under the gender dimension in the value chain of small scale fishery and aquaculture in Southeast Asia. We will conduct this study from 2020 to 2022. In of COVID-19 pandemic. So the result of this study is in process. So now we are more cover in 4 areas of our member country. We have the study in marine capture in Philippines, marine culture in Thailand, and marine aquaculture in Thailand, inland fishery in Laos, PDR, and inland capture in Myanmar. So, and another current project of SEAFDEC is under the Japanese Trust Fund on small scale fishery management for better livelihood and fishery resources. This project is try to formulate fishery management plan under the EAFM process, and also we try to integrate gender dimension in all project area too. So this, I show you, this is a picture that we try to start with the baseline survey on socioeconomic and gender analysis in our study site, and we try to report the result of our study to the local community, that what we found about the baseline survey, and we try to tell them about why we are study on the gender analysis, and like we give them some idea or knowledge about the gender and gender equality for the local people under this project. So that's all of currently project that finished in the previous and currently project that I show you. In this one, on the resource enhancement activity, this is a already terminated project quite long time ago, but I would like to show you in this forum because this one is related to biodiversity. So in fishery, we exhibit the fish refuge for Batang-ay group. This activity is in Sihanoukville, Cambodia. So in this group is fully participated by women, and women, 4 of them are the leader and member of the group. And I just would like to tell you this story because the member of the group is, the leader of the group is quite young. And this one is, and finally the project can announce the area for fish refuge for Batang-ay to preserve the women job, because the women here, they will collect the brass cockle by hand, and there is the in this area was enclosed by the commercial fishing boats. That's why we try to protect this area to protect the local community job, especially women working for this job. And to get this announcement, to get this promulgation, we engage women also join us on the list to find the spawning ground and spawning period of the broad cockle. I would like to show that how women participated in our resource enhancement activity. And let's come to my conclusion. So you can see that in fishery, there are a role of women in the fishery value chain in all process. and women role is dominant in fishing processing. So for us now, we think that for the result that already show you that the role mostly focus on the economic side. So we would like to engage women more in conservation in fishery, because as I show you, that is the case in Cambodia. So we found that women can help to enhance the resource enhancement in all area of the Southeast Asia. So we think that from that kind of success, we think we need more thinking about to strengthen women in all elements of the sustainable social, economic, and resource, and preserve the resources. So that's all of my presentation today. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Jariya. Thank you for bringing us to look at what SEAFDEC is doing, and really, an organization putting in gender dimension at all levels in your organization. And this is, I think, very good to look at, and how you interact to make sure that gender policy is integrated, and making SEAFDEC to be visible as a champion for gender sensitive and gender responsive organization. And it's also good to note that you have a lot of completed and ongoing projects that are funded by various bodies to look at the role of women, and research and analysis that can contribute towards gender mainstreaming, and also related to agrobiodiversity, what they are playing. So I will stop there, because we are also, I want to catch with the time, and so that I can look at all the questions that are being posed to our panelists. I will bring all the three panelists back, and so let me see that just one moment. It seems Elisabeth have answered the question. Just to share again that there's a second the question to appropriate tool for to investigate the local knowledge and agrobiodiversity. Maybe you can elaborate on this. What are these tools that we can use to measure, or as that local knowledge on agrobiodiversity is incorporated? Could you share that, Elisabeth? Thank you.
Sure, thank you. I think it's a very good question. So what I work on mainly is participatory methods, which are very qualitative, but with the idea to also make them quantitative. And you could use them both for when you do a project survey or scoping survey, as well as for monitoring tools. So there's a whole range of tools in there. And it's really just about being creative. But I think one point was mentioned that I find very important to repeat, what Cynthia was mentioning about how can you know what to ask for if you don't know what's on the market. And we use multi-criteria analysis, which is a good example of really complicating things when farmers are supposed to give ideas and rank and score examples of what they want to do in a catchment, for example. And they may not even know what the solutions are. So I think very importantly, before you come up with these options, to go and visit other places and make farmers connect and see good examples that are in place. Maybe that's just around the corner in a neighboring province or a neighboring community, to see and understand what those issues are. So something we have done a lot in when we had the climate CCAPs, projects, climate change, agriculture and food security, was to have roving workshops where farmers were, not, of course, not the entire community, but farmers were traveling around to visit different places as a field excursion, let's say, but with very, very constructive and clear points about what they were going to look at. And I think those type of things are as important as going around and looking for things. And farmers may also not always know the names of these crops and plants, especially the ones in the nature. So that's very important to work with them to map them out and know what they are and get the stories around the use of them, the way they use them. So that those tools, yeah, it's a bit being creative as well as just copying another existing tool to do that.
Right. Thank you. Cynthia and Jariya, would you like to add from your perspective in terms of the indicators or the tools that you use? And maybe Cynthia first, from if you want to look at voice or choice, or what areas can we measure or look at to see the gender element is included? If you could share that, thank you.
Thanks, that's a terrific question. And I would just echo what Elisabeth said, I mean, first about the visiting, but also it brought to mind that years ago when I worked in forestry, actually, one of the best ways to help people identify innovation was to do this kind of visit, because sometimes and very often innovation is not entirely new. It's actually innovations about stirring the pot and bringing new ideas into different contexts, or old ideas into new contexts. Building on that, in fact, still from forestry, one of the best ways that I saw for monitoring was also participatory monitoring by communities, where they themselves came up with indicators, but with an explicit idea that they were measuring a vision of their own future that was important to them. And so the facilitators in this case from outside, including researchers, were asking questions and prompting people to remember to think about equity as well as biodiversity, as well as food, as well as health and sanitation, to help make sure that all the important areas were covered. But then the communities themselves broke those visions down into accessible areas. And sometimes they were measured very qualitatively, but other times also the community would set up measures of, for example, around soil erosion or diversity. In fact, as I recall, people were actually looking at aspects like bird sightings and bringing those in and having really nice locally grounded measures that combined social and biophysical. Just more on the voice and choice side, I can share, I'll put in the chat, we've just released a tool that takes the notion of participation and unpacks it into something that we hope is more meaningful. So this is around voice, because often projects, whether it's agrobiodiversity or other areas, say, well, if somebody shows up, they have participated, therefore women have had their say because they showed up in a meeting. But this unpacks it into, do people attend? Do people have the information they need to make a good decision? Do they speak up? Do they feel respected? And do they have influence on the decision? And I think that's really useful to try to break voice down in that way. So I can put that tool in the chat that comes from very old notions of inclusive decision-making and ladders of participation.
Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you. Jariya, would you like to add from your side? Yes, please.
Yes. Thank you very much. So for us, as I show you in my presentation, we always, when we would like to know about the gender, we always have the gender analysis in that kind and that area. So we think, I think the basic tool is very, very useful for us to understand the role of women and men, the access and control in their area. So, and now we have many contacts for us to cover. And like a SEAFDEC, now we are trying to matching about the gender analysis too, and relevant with the the FAO guideline, voluntary guideline for small scale fishery and aquaculture. So for us, that's kind of information from the gender analysis. And when we talk with the people in deep, we will know that what they need, and it's useful for the project manager in development project to respond to create the intervention that what the people in that area need. So, and then we can set the like a gender sensitive indicator to follow up. That's the project. This is I just can tell you just only my part in working, but in actually this is still the idea for work for us, because now we are just, as you know, that SEAFDEC, how to say that, not really just starting, that we have been working with the gender in previous, but we doesn't thinking about this is the gender lens of us already. So now we are more like put the theory of the gender inside and more how to say that, become the gender sensitive and responsive organization. So we really hope that it's our idea. So actually we produce a guideline for someone for gender analysis in Southeast Asia, by we mix between the gender analysis framework with the FAO voluntary guideline, and we hope that we can follow that guideline to improve the fishery sustainable in line with the gender equity and equality in our Southeast Asian country. So if you would like to see that guideline, I can share you in the chat, in the link. Also, I can send you the link in the chat also too. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jariya. Okay, I will go to the final question, and this is related to documentation, and I think this is about knowledge management side. When we capture knowledge, when we document, how do we share and make sure that that knowledge is being transferred and used? I think this is very critical, very important question that Ahmad Solikin have posed. So I would call, how do you document all the tacit knowledge from indigenous community on biodiversity conservation in Southeast Asia? And how does your institution make documentation, records that make sure they are not siloed? Yeah, a lot of us work in silo and not people outside, see what we do. So how do you look at knowledge management per se from here? I call Cynthia first. Cynthia, you can address this one first.
Thank you. And my answer will be very quick, in part because it's relating to my organization. In fact, I've just joined SEI, so I'm sure there are people better placed at SEI to speak to that. But I can say just very quickly, I think at the moment, we're thinking in terms of two guiding principles, and one is open access, and that and this applies to the organization I just came from as well, World Fish, where the idea is that all data will become open access and all findings will become open access. But the second principle is ethics, and that's sort of a counterpoint, because there are very, very, very important issues about privacy and what data is sensitive at a personal level, what data is needs to be protected from the public domain for other reasons, like potentially it could trigger a threat to tenure or something like that, or intellectual property issues about ovarian genetics. So I think that those two principles are the ones that for me stay in the front of mind, open access and ethics. And then project by project, we need to figure out what's the best way to balance those. And I like to always ask, so whose data is this? Who owns it? Who can use it? Who needs to benefit from it? Who should have a say in how it's used? And so that's my approach overall.
Thank you, Cynthia. Elisabeth, you can also speak about the apps that whether appropriate, and how data through apps can be abused or misused. So I think maybe you could share this as well.
Well, I just want to say that what Cynthia said is exactly right. We need to anonymize information and also think of indigenous property rights, not only intellectual property rights, but indigenous property rights. So before I go into the apps, I just want to mention too, the way we collect information and accumulate information is through this agroclimate information meetings that farmers have. So they have a lot of local knowledge, but they use that when they prepare for the next agro-advisory. So gradually we're accumulating their knowledge in terms of how to respond to a weather forecast that is a seasonal weather forecast and also shorter term. So that is how they keep it in the community, and it's also publicly shared then in that locality where it's relevant for. So I think just collecting that information is important, because there is a gap in generations who stay on the farm. So the young ones leave, but maybe they come back when they're 35 or something like that, and they have no clue about many things. So this is like an historical document also in terms of that village knowledge and community knowledge they will keep there. For the apps, I think there are a lot of things. So I think better I just given a quick reference to the paper, because there are so many aspects of misuse of digital information that many farmers are not even aware of what you give away when you sign up to an app, or when you share information in Facebook or WhatsApp or whatever tools we are using. So that's a whole other area.
Yeah. Thank you, Elisabeth. Jariya, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, thank you very much. So I think, so SEAFDEC right now we also try to document the law of women and men in fishery and aquaculture for everyone to can cite that, yeah, this is the, like we try to bring the normal thing in the daily life become the documentation for everyone can citation. But from my work in this kind of case, I have seen many the thing that we can cite from the people when they are talking, and we can name it them, that they have their idea, and they just we can say that these people, they have this idea and say this. So, but and actually in the research way, we have to asking them for allowing us to present their word, their idea in our paper or in our communication product. So from now, I think this is the research is really quite is open for people. We can have many information, and we can refer to the sort of information that we are collecting it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jariya. Thank you. With that, I would like to just conclude or summarize our session today, and just to look at from the three lenses from our three speakers today. We see how the gender dimension is being integrated into policy, into the action in terms of our projects and program. In the first one, we see that to make sure that we realize that women have different way of looking at things compared to men. So this is really something that we have to imagine. They look at even what type of trees that should be included, what type of species should be included. They look at labor aspect. They look at even how to use information through digital platform, what kind of information they would like to have to address to help them to take their function forward. We also understand that we have to, in making sure that we have good policy forward, we have to put forth that the choices of women are really being specifically mainstreaming. The way this must be evident. Their voice must be heard, whether in the action or in the policy itself. And we must understand what are the underlying constraint of culture, of social norm in their context. We heard yesterday and today, that different culture have different way of looking at things. And in fact, when we talk about the ethics of how knowledge can be transferred or knowledge to be shared, I think this also have to be respected. Okay, with that, I also see that the effort in various organizations, especially in SEAFDEC today, we see what role an organization like SEAFDEC can play to make sure that the gender element is evident, is put forth. Otherwise, this again will be lost in our policy context, in our action. That is my wrap up for this session. I really would like to thank our three panelists today. I have a tremendous fun in this session, very, a wealth of knowledge that we are getting. And thank you so much for your time and enlightening us into all your specific topics with your expertise and work. Thank you. And I look forward to seeing you again physically, maybe somewhere, sometime. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. Bye. Thank you. So stay on, we continue. I pass back to you, Ratna. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, all the powerful ladies, for fantastic discussions and also inputs, sharing, which is truly appreciated. Right now, we are at the end of the first panel session. We will commence shortly in 15 minutes. So we will be back here at 11 o'clock GMT +7 Bangkok time. So we will see you in 15 minutes. In the meantime, Dr. Elisabeth, just a request, could you kindly email me the PowerPoint? Thank you.
Sure.
I see hands up from Mr. Huang. Anything urgent that he would like to address? I'm not sure.
Oh, Mr. Huang, do you have any question? Sorry, we didn't notice you. Sorry.
Đúng rồi. Vâng, tôi không có câu hỏi mà tôi cũng xin có hai ý kiến.
I have two comments I want to make. The first one, it is about the research by Dr. Elisabeth, and my second question, my second comment on Dr. Cynthia. So, okay, regarding Dr. Elisabeth, research, I have participated some workshops organized by eCraft, and regarding research, my organization only work with the community, so I would not talk about the technical aspect of the research. But you said that the women, they choose to grow more trees than men. Men choose fewer trees. But when we work with the community in practice, it has, we realize that there are causes of that. There is reason for that. We talk to the community why women choose more trees, because the women are the one who directly work with the trees. They transfer the knowledge to other people. They are closer to the nature. They know the vegetable in the wild. They know different vegetable, different kinds of trees that can be used as a string for tightening. But men, they mainly know the spicy plants grown in their home garden for their daily meals. And in addition, some men only have a understanding about the medicinal herbs, because in some ethnic minority, the medicinal formula is only circulated to men instead of women. That's why men choose to grow fewer trees than women. Okay, regarding Dr. Cynthia about the interaction between gender and biodiversity, between voice and choice. So I want to share some points regarding that. In terms of choice, men have bigger impacts on choice. What does that mean? For example, choose what trees to grow to have income for the family. It's the men. So the men, they have a like a bigger voice in choosing what trees for family income. But women's voice mainly focus on medicinal herbs and vegetables in their gardens. So this is about the voice, right? The voice, even though a voice has more trees to grow, or they know more trees to grow, but their voice, they do not have voice in making. So that's why we have to promote policies on gender equality to balance the women's choice and men's choice, especially in decision making, because when we work with the community, we see the local authorities, they when they talk about the equality, they only say like buying a motorbike or some furniture in the family. For example, buying television, motorbike, who we choose? Is there any dialogues between wives and husbands? Choose what trees to grow, to have economic values for the family, mainly depends on the man. So I think we should, yes. The question is, how can we, what kind of intervention should we have to make sure that women have a better voice in decision making? I just want to, to share some perspective based on our experience when we work with the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Huang. Very important comment. And this is looking at coming from a man, because our panelists are all women. So really, we really need your perspective for this. Thank you so much. I think the panelists will take into consideration all your comment today. And of course, I think McDougall Institute will also put forth this comment into their report. Thank you so much. So I'll give back to you, Ratna. Thank you.
Dr. Cynthia, if you have some something to share, or Dr. Elisabeth, probably you can put in the chat box so that we can also see your response to Mr. Wang.
Can I just quickly share one picture that I got from the farmers just now? They are, I don't know if you can see, they are looking at the Agrobiodiversity.
Okay.
So this is their knowledge. They just shared it right now.
Great. Yeah. Wow.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Elisabeth. Thank you, everyone. So once again, we will be back at 11 a.m. Proper, and then we will start as soon as at 11 a.m. So we'll see you back here at 11 a.m. Thank you, everyone.
Ensuring functionality and resiliency of food system is the key to sustainable development in the ASEAN region and worldwide. Maintaining agrobiodiversity will help balancing ecosystems and its services to all forms of lives and food production. Recognizing the importance of gender equalities and empowering women as part of broader social inclusive development in agriculture and biodiversity are underlying success factors.
Women in indigenous and rural communities are the keepers of seeds and knowledge, and practices which contribute to the agrobiodiversity at community level, yet their role often lacks recognition. Women, especially those in rural and indigenous communities, need a safe and responsive space to voice out their challenges and concerns in relation to food security and sustainable food systems.
Against this background, McDougall Institute sees this opportunity to partner with the Stockholm Environment Institute, the New Zealand Aid Program, and the Lao PDR Agrobiodiversity platform in organizing a two-day forum on harnessing the benefit of agrobiodiversity to build sustainable and inclusive food systems.
This forum will serve as a platform for women to gather together, to share knowledge and experiences, and magnify their voices, to ensure that safe and responsive spaces exist for them, to influence national and regional strategies on sustainable food systems.
An impressive pool of experts on Indigenous and rural women and agrobiodiversity in the ASEAN region will join the forum.
We look forward to receiving useful and responsive inputs from regional and national women representatives.
We are calling representatives of rural and Indigenous women and communities, young women and youth to join us in this initiative.
Together, let us harness the benefits of agrobiodiversity to build sustainable and inclusive food systems.
Let's put our hands together to ensure that we leave no one behind.
SEI Asia, with support from the Swedish government, launched the Strategic Collaborative Fund or SCF program in 2018 to enhance the current 2030 agenda efforts in Asia and the Pacific. Our goal is to create long-term partnerships to enhance policy impact and institutional capacity building in Asia under the framework of regional integration and the Sustainable Development Goals. We also support the research policy dialogue to build more effective regional policies that contribute to the SDGs. SCF provides opportunities for multi-stakeholder engagement platforms to enhance regional collaboration across Asia, inter-regional policy development and institutional capacity with multi-stakeholders. In all the initiatives that we do or support, we make sure that evidence-based human rights and gender equality approaches are at the center. We conduct direct coaching sessions with our partners, and we also created online courses on human rights and gender. SCF focuses its outreach in Asia and beyond. We have a partnership with the Asia-Europe Foundation, where we host sessions under the Environment Forum to share knowledge and build capacity for policymakers, businesses and civil society from Asia and Europe on issues related to sustainable development and climate change. We also support the China-ASEAN Environment Cooperation Forum, which is a platform for China and ASEAN to discuss environmental cooperation and policies for sustainable development. In the Asian region, SCF gives yearly grants to organizations to host strategic regional events that highlight key issues that are linked to the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. The goal is to enhance regional collaboration and partnership to lead efforts toward policy development and regional sustainability. Through this program, we want to be able to influence public policy and push for a more sustainable and inclusive development in Asia.
Ensuring functionality and resiliency of food system is the key to sustainable development in the ASEAN region and worldwide. Maintaining agrobiodiversity will help balancing ecosystems and empowering women as part of broader social inclusive development in agriculture and biodiversity are underlying success factors.
Women in indigenous and rural communities are the keepers of seeds and knowledge and practices which contribute to the agrobiodiversity at community level. Yet their role often lacks recognition. Women, especially those in rural and indigenous communities, need a safe and responsive space to voice out their challenges and concerns in relation to food security and sustainable food systems.
Against this background, Mekong Institute seized this opportunity to partner with the Stockholm Environment Institute, the New Zealand Aid Program, and the Lao PDR Agrobiodiversity platform in organizing a two-day forum on harnessing the benefit of agrobiodiversity to build sustainable and inclusive food systems.
This forum will serve as a platform for women to gather together, to share knowledge and experiences, and magnify their voices, to ensure that safe and responsive spaces exist for them, to influence national and regional strategies on sustainable food systems.
An impressive pool of experts on Indigenous and rural women and agrobiodiversity in the ASEAN region will join the forum.
We look forward to receiving useful and responsive inputs from regional and national women representatives.
We are calling representatives of rural and Indigenous women and communities, young women and youth to join us in this initiative.
Together, let us harness the benefits of agrobiodiversity to build sustainable and inclusive food systems.
Let's put our hands together to ensure that we leave no one behind.
SEI Asia, with support from the Swedish government, launched the Strategic Collaborative Fund or SCF program in 2018 to enhance the current 2030 agenda efforts in Asia and the Pacific. Our goal is to create long-term partnerships to enhance policy impact and institutional capacity building in Asia under the framework of regional integration and the Sustainable Development Goals. We also support the research policy dialogue to build more effective regional policies that contribute to the SDGs. SCF provides opportunities for multi-stakeholder engagement platforms to enhance regional collaboration across Asia, inter-regional policy development and institutional capacity with multi-stakeholders. In all the initiatives that we do or support, we make sure that evidence-based human rights and gender equality approaches are at the center. We conduct direct coaching sessions with our partners, and we also created online courses on human rights and gender. SCF focuses its outreach in Asia and beyond. We have a partnership with the Asia Europe Foundation, where we host sessions under the Environment Forum to share knowledge and build capacity for policymakers, businesses and civil society from Asia and Europe on issues related to sustainable development and climate change. We also support the China-ASEAN Environment Cooperation Forum, which is a platform for China and ASEAN to discuss environmental cooperation and policies for sustainable development. In the Asian region, SCF gives yearly grants to organizations to host strategic regional events that highlight key issues that are linked to the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. The goal is to enhance regional collaboration and partnership to lead efforts toward policy development and regional sustainability. Through this program, we want to be able to influence public policy and push for a more sustainable and inclusive development in Asia.
Ensuring functionality and resiliency of food system is the key to sustainable development in the ASEAN region and worldwide. Maintaining agrobiodiversity will help balancing ecosystems and its services to all forms of lives and food production. Recognizing the importance of gender equalities and empowering women as part of broader social inclusive development in agriculture and biodiversity are underlying success factors.
Women in indigenous and rural communities are the keepers of seeds and knowledge, and practices, with especially those in rural and indigenous communities, need a safe and responsive space to voice out their challenges and concerns in relation to food security and sustainable food systems.
Against this background, Mekong Institute sees this opportunity to partner with the Stockholm Environment Institute, the New Zealand Aid Program, and the Lao PDR Agrobiodiversity platform in organizing a two-day forum on harnessing the benefit of agrobiodiversity to build sustainable and inclusive food systems.
This forum will serve as a platform for women to gather together, to share knowledge and experiences, and magnify their voices, to ensure that safe and responsive spaces exist for them, to influence national and regional strategies on sustainable food systems.
An impressive pool of experts on indigenous and rural women and agrobiodiversity in the ASEAN region will join the forum.
We look forward to receiving useful and responsive inputs from regional and national women representatives.
We are calling representatives of rural and indigenous women and communities, young women and youth to join us in this initiative.
Together, let us harness the benefits of agrobiodiversity to build sustainable and inclusive food systems.
Let's put our hands together to ensure that we leave no one behind.
SEI Asia, with support from the Swedish government, launched the Strategic Collaborative Fund or SCF program in 2018 to enhance the current 2030 agenda efforts in Asia and the Pacific. Regional integration and the Sustainable Development Goals. We also support the research policy dialogue to build more effective regional policies that contribute to the SDGs. SCF provides opportunities for multi-stakeholder engagement platforms to enhance regional collaboration across Asia, inter-regional policy development and institutional capacity with multi-stakeholders. In all the initiatives that we do or support, we make sure that evidence-based human rights and gender equality approaches are at the center. We conduct direct coaching sessions with our partners, and we also created online courses on human rights and gender. SCF focuses its outreach in Asia and beyond. We have a partnership with the Asia-Europe Foundation, where we host sessions under the Environment Forum to share knowledge and build capacity for policymakers, businesses and civil society from Asia and Europe on issues related to sustainable development and climate change. We also support the China-ASEAN Environment Cooperation Forum, which is a platform for China and ASEAN to discuss environmental cooperation and policies for sustainable development. In the Asian region, SCF gives yearly grants to organizations to host strategic regional events that highlight key issues that are linked to the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. The goal is to enhance regional collaboration and partnership to lead efforts toward policy development and regional sustainability. Through this program, we want to be able to influence public policy and push for a more sustainable and inclusive development in Asia.
Ensuring functionality and resiliency of food systems is the key to sustainable development in the ASEAN region and worldwide.
Welcome back, everyone. Hi, Annie. Yes.
Yes, I'm here.
Sorry, man. Okay, so for this session, we have Kanlaya. And
may I share my screen also now? Yeah.
Mr. Vannak and Ms. June, right? Okay, Miss Eleanor will be replaced by Miss June Batang-ay, but from the same organization.
Okay, Miss June. Okay. So here I have Miss June.
Okay.
Okay, the rest are okay?
Yes. Okay, so I will hand over the Zoom platform to you, Annie.
Thank you very much, Ratna. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. We will now commence our second session, panel session for today. In this session, we will really, we will try to look at, not try, but we want to, yeah, look at the success factors that, again, that are enabling rural and indigenous women to safeguard agrobiodiversity through the integration of agrobiodiversity in their rural farming system or indigenous food system, where they are using their local knowledge, cultural practices, food tradition to provide diverse range of nutritious and fresh food to their household. So we have three speakers who work on the ground with the community, with the women. So we will bring in their perspective and their experiences in identifying what would be the success factors that that has become an enabling factor for them to continue to work to conserve our agrobiodiversity and ensuring food security at the local and community level. So the first speaker, we have Mr. Kanlaya Chularattakorn, who is the manager of the Indigenous Women Network of Thailand. The second speaker, we have Ms. June. I don't have your full name, Ms. June, so later you probably have to introduce yourself a bit. And she will be representing the Secretariat of the Asean Indigenous Women's Network. And we have the thorn among our roses today that we will hear from Mr. Vannak, the Deputy Director from the Culture and Environment Preservation Association. So this will be our scope of presentation today. And I would like to first call on Ms. Kanlaya Chularattakorn, I hope I pronounce your name correctly, to do our the first presentation. And again, we hope that the speaker would speak slowly and keep to the 10 to 15 minutes presentation, and so that will allow us time for Q&A at the end of the session. Ms. Kanlaya, the manager of IWNT, working with this organization that has been founded since 1996 as part of the Intermountain People's Education and Culture in Thailand Association, IMPACT. They have been working to provide gender perspective to development work and undertaken many initiatives to represent the interests of indigenous women in Thailand. So today we'll hear more about specifically of the indigenous women in Thailand. And Women's Rights Program is also working with local authority, and they have been engaging a lot in national advocacy with Thai UN, HRC, AICHR, yeah, and UN mandate holders. a number of international platforms. So I think it is really fortunate to have Ms. Kanlaya to address us today and share their work on the ground and share what factors would be enabling. And I will introduce each speaker just before their presentation. So with that, may I call on Ms. Kanlaya to present your work to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Annie. Can I share screen or I can just speak?
You can share screen. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Okay, so good morning, everyone. And also, I would like to thank to the organizers of these meetings, these seminars, for allowing me to speak. In this meeting. As being introduced now, my name is Kanlaya Chularattakorn, and I am currently working as manager of the Indigenous Women's Network of Thailand. We have office based in Chiang Mai, Thailand. And yes, this is my short presentation now, about 10 minutes now. Okay, so I would like to give you a brief introduction about the indigenous people of Thailand. Currently now, as per the record of the Simelton Anthropological Study Centers, we have at least now 70 indigenous groups in Thailand across all regions, now from north to northeast, central, west, and south of Thailand. And currently now there are 40 groups now members now of the network of indigenous peoples in Thailand, or NIP now, NIPT NIP now, which is based in Chiang Mai, Thailand now, and it's managed now by Impact now, Impact Association. And talking about livelihoods now, and then how to say occupation now, the majorities now of the indigenous people of Thailand are farmers now, or farmers. But in my presentation, I will be focusing on the Hmong indigenous group now. The Hmong indigenous groups now is a mountainous indigenous group now, and mostly now they are living in the north of Thailand now, and partly now there are also some Hmong people living in the west of Thailand. And traditionally now the Hmong people, they practice rotational farming, where they grow rice as the main crops for the household consumption now, and also corn now as the cash crop. In addition to rice and corn, it is also founded that there are more than 32 edible crops, plants now that are grown inside and also around the rice plantation of the Hmong people. And also it is founded now that around the house now, and also in the home garden of the Hmong people now. Of all women now, there are at least 42 edible plants now. This is grown now for the nutrition and also food security of the family members. And out of these 42 edible plants now, at least 15 types now of species are medicinal plants now, which is used by the Hmong women for the treatment of illness of the family members. And traditional role of the women in our society, in our communities. The women, they are the cook of the house, and also because they are the cook of the house, they take very important roles in deciding what to grow, how much to grow, and also where to grow. And also because they are the one deciding what to grow, where to. Women they have knowledge. They are the expert on soil, and they know what soil is good for what plants and what crops. And also because women is the one. You hear me, no?
Yes, but we could hear, but could you remove the pop-up? Yeah, close that.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, thank you.
Okay, and also women are the seed keepers because they are responsible for the food of the family. So they are responsible for the seed. They each year women will keep some seeds that will be grown, will be kept for next year's plantation. So they also know that what's type of crops should be kept and what crop should not be kept based on the taste and also the quality of that the yield of that crops. And also, yeah, like I mentioned earlier, based on the study of one professor at Chiang Mai University, Professor Yot Santa Sombat, which is conducted in 2004. He found that there are varieties of plants around the house of the Hmong people, 42 species, and also in the rotational farm, there are around 32 species. This is what he found in 2004. Yes. Okay, 1 minute. Sorry, I have problem with my presentation. Yes, that's what I presented now. What was the traditional role of the indigenous Hmong women in Thailand? Yeah, and I want to also show you some pictures here. These are some picture of the role of the Hmong women as the seed keeper, as the one deciding on the food, the crops to be keep and to be planted. Yes, and in the farm of the Hmong people, you can see there are different varieties of crops now.
Yeah. Would you like to put that on full screen mode, or you prefer to easier for you to?
Okay, and also they are also involved with medicinal plants, medicine for the basic treatment of the family members, and also for sharing with the community members. And this is one picture of how they kept the seeds. Yes, that's what it has been. And yes, so some of it has been practicing nowadays, but this is the situation, the current situation of the agricultural practices of the Hmong people and the role of the women. The challenge and the current practices. What we are facing now is that there's still some misunderstanding of our own agricultural system, the rotational farming system. It has been viewed by the authorities as a system that is not good, it's not friendly for the environment. And because of this, there are some policies that limit our access to natural resources, especially land. So nowadays, the Hmong people, especially, and also many other indigenous people in Thailand, they have had very limited to the use of land. And because of this belief, this misunderstanding of the government on our livelihood, our life, our traditional agricultural system, we have adapt our way of life, our agricultural practices, and instead of planting the crops in the farmland, we have to plant it in the greenhouse. Many communities, especially those located in national health, by planting the crops in the greenhouse. And also instead of planting different kinds of crops, the Hmong people, especially they now planting only monocrops, only one type of crop in one plantation. I would show you this. This is how the people, the indigenous people are planting nowadays in Thailand with very limited land. And because we have limited land, we have been planting in the same land for many years. There are also problem on the degradation of soil fertilities, and this also leading to less yield and less production of the crops. And also the chemical pesticides, fertilizers are also being introduced to many indigenous communities in Thailand, especially the Hmong and the Karen. Yes, one thing that we observe, my organization, the Indigenous Women's Network of Thailand, we observe that the occupation of the indigenous people has been diversified due to low price of the crops, and also degradation of the soil, and many of indigenous people have entered into tourism, and also many have moved to the city for labor, to do labor. And another observation that we found is that just this year, currently this year, we have conducted studies on the biodiversity and also food security for indigenous women, and we found that there are reduction of the agro-biodiversities among the indigenous communities in Thailand. Our report came out in 2021, and we found that nowadays there are less than 10 crops founded species now founded around the house now instead of 42 now there are only now 10 crops now 10 species of plants now founded around the house and less than 6 species now founded in the plantation in the farm of the Hmong people. Now this case is conducted in the community of Hmong and Karen now, but this is the number presented in the case of the Hmong people now. And also, yes, they are also leading to health problem now, especially stress and mental problems now, and also there are death problem also now, because with this new farming system now, the monocrop system now, indigenous people, especially the Hmong now, the Hmong and the Karen now, they have to adapt themselves now to the new way of farming system, and also they have to borrow the seed. No? They are losing their control over the seed. No? Their traditional seed cannot be. It's not how to say. It's not the product now that is. It's needed by the market now. So instead they have to grow the cash crop now, the crops that can be sold now to the market. So they have to buy seed, they have to buy equipments now, to invest in the equipments to build the greenhouse now. And also they have to buy fertilizers, and the price of the products now are not stable now. So there are a lot of challenge now faced by the indigenous people now, especially women now, who are the one who are responsible now for the farming, for the agricultural practices of the indigenous communities. And yes, one example now of the loss of agrobiodiversity in the case of the Hmong people is the loss of hemp. Hemp is very important plant now for the Hmong people. Now they use it for medicines. Now they use it to make clothes. Now this plants now is believed now by the Hmong people that it will help now to protect the Hmong people now, especially the dead person along the way now when he's going back to the land of the ancestors. So the hemp now has been very closely linked now with the life and the belief of the Hmong people, but because of the law in the countries which is seen this kind of plant as a drugs as a plant of drugs. So it's does not allow the Hmong people to grow this kind of plants. So nowadays in Thailand, we are importing each year a lot of hemp products from China, and also especially Vietnam to Thailand to make clothes. So this is one one loss of the plants in Thailand due to law, the law of the countries. And yes, I don't know how much time I have now.
If you can wrap up, would be good. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I have here now some food for thought. That how can we maintain the world's agro-biodiversity when the role and the rights of indigenous people, especially indigenous women, over the management of our own land and traditional agricultural practices are not recognized and are also being taken away, and it's believed now that the only way to keep the world's agro-biodiversity is to recognize and respect the rights and the roles of indigenous women and their traditional agricultural system. So yes, this is very short messages from me and from the Indigenous Women's Network of Thailand. Thank you.
Thank you, Kanlaya. Thank you so much for that. As we look into specifically into the Hmong community, yeah, we understand a lot more what are the challenges that being faced. You mentioned a number of critical factors that we need to address if we would like to enable them to continue their practices and custom. And first is, of course, to overcome this misunderstanding about their culture. And I think this is very critical area that we have to address. And limited use of land, their rights to land. I think a lot of this have been is coming into the discussion into these 2 days. So at least later we can, in the plenary discussion, maybe we can dive more into that. Another threat that we see is also the modern technologies or new technologies, greenhouse, monocropping that is coming in, that affecting not only the quality and quantity of agrobiodiversity, but also the way of life that have been changed. That leads to health problems, including the non-communicable diseases, high blood pressure, mental illnesses, debts. These are I think very critical area that we have to look at. I thank you so much for that presentation, and I would wait for I hope more will be the Q&A we will address later together. And I don't want to lose sight on one critical element about the role of women, indigenous women, in seed saving. Seed saving is very, very important for ABD, and their knowledge and capacity to keep the seed must be looked into very critically. I think this was also mentioned earlier in the first panel. I think Dr. Cynthia mentioned about this. So we really need to look at the role of indigenous women in seed keeping, seed saving. This is very important. Thank you, Kanlaya. So may I now call our second speaker. Our second speaker will be Ms. June. Yeah, Ms. June. From the Secretariat of ASEAN Indigenous Women Network. June, are you here?
Yes, can you hear me well?
Hi, June. Yeah, I don't have your profile, so again, please introduce yourself and please introduce what your organization is looking into, and specifically looking at the way indigenous people are being put forth. I give the floor to you, June, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Annie. So, as mentioned, I am June Kadalik Batang-ay. I'm a Kanlaya Gurut from the Northern Philippines. And I'm working with the Indigenous Peoples and Biodiversity Program of Tebtebba, which is a non-government organization working for the respect, protection, and fulfillment of Indigenous peoples' rights. Okay, so I was assigned to share insights with regards to the Indigenous women as custodians of agrobiodiversity. But before I would proceed, I would just like to provide a brief update on the update of the current negotiation or the issues being debated under the Convention on Biological Diversity, specifically on Aichi Biodiversity Target 18. So can I share my screen?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay. Is it in presentation mode?
Not yet, coming. Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
Okay, so as most of us are aware, the current strategic plan for biodiversity 2011-2020 is that is accompanied by the 20 Aichi biodiversity targets is being updated to ensure that the parties of the Convention on Biological Diversity is towards addressing biodiversity loss and achieving its 3 objectives. And this process is now being called the Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, which will be adopted at COP15 in China. So, but due to the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic in early 2020, most of the scheduled meetings and negotiations has been moved. So, under the current strategic plan, the contributions of indigenous peoples are monitored under Target 18, which is known as the Traditional Knowledge Target. So the International Indigenous Forum on Biodiversity, which is the caucus of indigenous peoples during the CBD meetings, has proposed that while a traditional knowledge target must remain in the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, that is on the right side of the screen, there should still, there must also be elements on indigenous people's rights and roles in other relevant targets that include community-based conservation and restoration, customary sustainable use, and a fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising from the utilization of genetic diversity. So further, in the current formulation of the draft 1 of the Global Biodiversity Framework, Target 21 has, the current Target 21 has also cross-cutting relevance to other targets and addresses the issues of unequal power relations and is more inclusive since it mentions women, girls, youth, and indigenous peoples and local communities. Further, the current language on the rights over lands, territories, and resources is aligned with the language of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Okay, so the CBD Women Caucus has also proposed a standalone target on gender, along with a call for a gender-responsive global biodiversity framework to highlight the important contributions of women in attaining the objectives of the convention. So for indigenous peoples, the collective actions on biodiversity are captured in the Local Biodiversity Outlooks, which is a publication that provides a snapshot on the on-the-ground initiatives led by indigenous peoples. The Local Biodiversity Outlooks also complement the Global Biodiversity Outlook of the Secretariat of the Convention on Biological Diversity that reports on biodiversity trends based on the reports submitted by the parties, and most does not capture indigenous initiatives. So in this point forward, I would like to share the different initiatives done by Tebtebba and its partners in the Philippines in mainstreaming women, youth in agrobiodiversity. So this currently the map I'm showing is the partners where Tebtebba does its work in the Philippines. So while indigenous peoples own vast tracts of lands, some communities still experience food shortage within their ancestral lands. And this promoted indigenous leaders to strengthen and sustain their indigenous systems and practice of sustainable utilization of their lands, territories, and resources. An example, an example is the Sulagad, or the traditional agricultural system of the Tederay and the Lambangian peoples in Maguindanao, which is located in the southern Philippines. So this group of people were able to establish several communal farms within their territories that served as source of food and serve as educational farms or demo farms for the younger generation to learn. So the process has empowered women and youth who have acted as volunteers and were able to revive traditional crop varieties and establish community nurseries and seed banks. So the photos are from the experiences of the partners in the Teduray and Lambangian community. A similar initiative is done by the Eromano ni Menovo in North Cotabato, which is also located in the southern Philippines, by practicing their suragad. And they were also able to establish several communal farms within their territories that serves as not just as a source of food, but a source of livelihood for women and youth. So the women and youth were able to partner with other groups who provided them capacity building in ecological agriculture. So in this particular group or in this particular community, they have this, they have this slogan. So the food always in the home, or they called it faith, which serve as a guiding framework to further promote the practice of sustainable resource utilization, and were able to influence the Sangguniang Kabataan Federation, or the Federation of Youth in the municipality, and was able to include this surrogate strengthening in their government programs. So this is a photo of the indigenous youth in Midsayap. Okay. Another similar example is in the adjacent municipality in North Cotabato, wherein the Tinonanon ni Manovo were able to develop food sufficiency plans in accordance with the culture-sensitive farming technologies, and were also able to document at least four types of traditional farming practices done within the community. So this is a photo of a typical Manobo community, which is along their traditional farms. Okay, so the process has established food security mechanisms and highlighted the role of women and youth as custodians of knowledge in agriculture. So the photo shows a indigenous women showing different corn varieties harvested within their traditional farms. And also a photo of indigenous leaders and youth, which has conducted monitoring within their indigenous farms.
Ms. June?
Okay. Yes?
I think the slide is not moving.
Oh, the slide is not showing?
No, it's showing, but it's not moving. When you say pictures of the community, we are not seeing that. We only see this big map of. Are you still talking about the same map, the UPACAT partnership map?
Yes, I'm referring to the different map. But when I click the communities, oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Wait, I'll stop share. And maybe, okay, sorry. There has been a problem in sharing, so.
Because I saw your mouse moving, but, the slide is not moving. Yeah.
So there has been a problem in, okay, wait. Okay, so, okay, wait for, so I will share screen again. So, yeah. Okay.
So the last screen we saw was the UPACAT map.
Yeah, that was the last screen. But when I, okay, so when I click the icons for the different maps, the photos are not
photos.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I will share it. So for instance, as I've mentioned, okay, So this is the photo of the Sulagat, the first example that I have mentioned for the Tedoray and the Lambangian, which were able to strengthen their traditional livelihood and were able to develop nurseries and seed banks for their communities. So it shows photos of how women and youth are very active in the community. So I hope it's showing now.
Yeah, on this slide it's showing. Yeah.
Okay, so
yeah.
Okay,
so I guess you have to go back and forth.
Yeah. So yes, my apologies. So this is a photo of indigenous youth planting in their traditional farms. And this photo is within the same community, which shows the monitoring that is being done by the Tedoray and the Lambangian community in their established communal farms within different areas in their communities. Okay, so in another community, I would present in North Cotabato, the Eromano Nimenovo community. I will share a screen so you can see the photos that I have been showing. Share screen. Okay, for the Eromano Nimenovo, this is also in the southern Philippines. So they have also established several communal communal farms where for the community practice their surrogate or their traditional agro-biodiversity or agro-farming systems. Okay, so these are photos from the community that they have sent to us when they conduct their community activities. Also, they have this guiding principle, as I have mentioned a while ago, the food always in the home, which enabled them to provide different varieties of food within their from their communal farms. So this is the community that I have mentioned that influenced the local government to integrate the conservation or the strengthening of these traditional farming practices within their local government units. Okay, so the third community is okay, so the my apologies. So can you see my screen now?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. So apologies for this technical glitch.
Okay, maybe what we can do in value of time, if you can finish from the main part of your presentation and later we visit the pictures.
Yes, I'm about to finish actually after this photos, but let me share this. Okay, so it seems I can pull out my other screen. So let me go. At least I have mentioned the different initiatives being done by our partners in the different areas in the Philippines. So here is the last community that I was mentioning. So this is a typical Manobo community with their traditional farms. and a photo of an indigenous woman showing traditional corn varieties reproduced in their farms. So, okay, here's the monitoring of the documentation of how the indigenous leaders and youth monitor their indigenous farms. However, despite all these initiatives, there are still despite these initiatives, there is still a need to further empower indigenous women to assert their rights to lands, territories, and resources, and guide their perspective in relation to food security vis-a-vis the rampant selling of ancestral lands and the monocrop farming systems being imposed in indigenous communities. The agro-biodiversity practices that were sustained through generations should be further strengthened by the provision of appropriate agricultural technologies, capital, and technical assistance by the local government units and other government agencies. As mentioned, I think earlier this morning, there's also a need for capacity building for the indigenous youth as the future leaders within the community. And at the global level, since the implementation of the Aichi biodiversity targets is about to close and to be superseded by the global biodiversity framework, and this plan fosters engagement of different stakeholders or relevant stakeholders. It is important for indigenous peoples and women to be able to effectively participate in the process to ensure that the framework has gender relevance or has gender perspective, and that it recognizes our rights and role in its implementation. So with this, I would like to thank you for the invitation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, June, for that very insightful and really interesting look, diving into 4 initiatives that you presented. The work of Tebtebba, the Indigenous People International Center for Policy Research and Education. Again, a similar theme keep coming up, similar issues. Lack of recognition about our traditional farming practices. I think this is something that earlier speaker also mentioned. We will revisit these factors again. And now I would like to call upon the special, the spotlight will be on our man only presenter for today, I guess, Mr. Vannak. Are we ready? Mr. Vannak, the Deputy Executive Director, Culture, Environment, Preservation Association, CEPA, based in Cambodia, right? So, Mr. Vannak, their work have been focusing on economic empowerment, rights-based approach, advocacy, and sustainable livelihoods in Cambodia. It will be interesting to see how CEPA work to look at the role of indigenous women in the forestry and fishery communities to support this, and how development plan and how they work with local authorities and provincial departments. So welcome, Mr. Vannak, and please may I pass the screen to you to share your work. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everybody. Particularly thank you for making Institute for allowing my opportunity to share my working experience in this good forum about my work, especially the Ratna. And thank you for Annie for your moderator. Can I share my slide? Okay, so I hope it won't have the same problem as the previous panelists. Okay, let's share. Okay. You see my presentation?
Coming up, not yet. Wait. Okay. So can you put on full screen? Yeah.
Right. Okay, so
it's still working, but I think it should be coming.
it showed the full screen already, or still?
Not yet. On my side, it is not yet. So, but I saw that you already clicked on the icon of the full screen, but it's not activating.
Okay, so
Bang Vannak,
sorry.
Can you click on the full screen again?
I already clicked it. On my screen, it's showing full screen already. So
Okay.
just waiting. Maybe the internet connection slow, or
I think it is internet connection.
I think you can start.
do you hear me clear?
Yeah, sound is
Okay,
good.
So,
okay.
So because I use another, I have two because my speaker on my computer has problem, and then I use my phone.
Okay.
So thank you again for Mekong Institute to help me opportunity to share my working experience. CEPA is a local non-profit organization who has been working for many years in Cambodia, particularly in the northeast of Cambodia, close to Laos border and Thalao border. And our expertise focusing on the fishery and forestry, and our target group including indigenous people and also the vulnerable group of rural women in northeast of Cambodia. So the presentation.
Sorry, Vannak. Maybe I may ask if I could just to come out, exit the share screen and reshare. Would that be okay? Reshare, because now for our side it's still not moving.
Okay. So
we'll try one more time. Otherwise, we'll stay with this mode. We'll try one more time. Exit sharing and reshare.
Yeah. So let me see where. Okay, stop session.
Okay.
And also, Mr. Vannak, if you could speak a little bit slower, it would be better.
Okay, thank you. Does it work?
Not yet. I think you still need double click because your icon is not.
Mr. Bang Vannak, can we try sharing from our side? Is it okay? No.
Your side. I can. Oh.
Maybe you use this method.
Did you see it? You see it, no?
Yeah.
We see, or if you can make the screen, but then you cannot. If you put on big screen first, screen and then share.
Yeah. So let us wait. I try another way. Share. Does that work?
Nope, still not working.
Oh.
Okay. So either we stay with this mode or you want to pass to Mekong Institute to control.
Yeah. So I have another presentation with I sent to Mekong Institute. You can use that one stuff.
Okay. Right now, would you control from your side?
Sorry.
So now you want to.
You see it? We can just see this.
Yeah. Okay. We stay with this mode. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah.
All right.
So Thank you. Sorry for the inconvenience in
No,
technology.
it's okay.
All right. So CEPA is at times working on the Mekong River, especially in the northeast of Cambodia, focusing on the community, focusing on the fishery and forestry development in Cambodia. We have nowadays we have more than 25 years working with community indigenous people and also the vulnerable rural women in northeast of Cambodia. And we have also the head office in Phnom Penh and others sub office in the Stintrai and Ratnakari province. We are working. Our working is strengthening democratic process and to promote rule of law and human rights for community, safeguard especially women, indigenous group, and low-income community members through the engagement in the natural resources management. Our new strategy for the 2021 to 2025 is focusing on the natural resources governance, which is to empowering the activists of the community-based natural resources group and other local initiative for environmental care and through capacity building, it's called a FIS2 and Salapum Action Community Action Research in which contribute directly sustainable resource governance. And other three strategic goals, we focus on the community livelihood, which is called a market-led livelihood strategy, where we focus linkage the livelihood, community livelihood, and market and the market. And the strategic three is the service. We also in our strategy also mentioned about our service on the environment, value added and anthropology to provide the service to the university student and also the community or other NGO who have need our service to provide. The strategy 4 it is on our building our organizational dynamic through the strengthening the institutional management in the in our organization. So in this we will raise the one of the experience we been working and on the community action research, where we are working with the local community in order to promote the community knowledge based on their experience and document it and sharing to the local authority to use and at the community level. Our research was focused on the fish species, plant species, deep pool conservation, fishing gear, and food consumption, climate change of the community in the target. Here the site where we are the project we are conducted. The objective of the research is to strengthen the natural resource management in Stintrai wetland Ramsar site to be sustainable through collecting information and knowledge on the local natural resources, link to the service provider, including key stakeholder, NGO, government agency, and other community for the evidence-based in decision making in natural resource management at the community level. Our process of the research is where we have the community research. We can call it a community-led research, where they identify and select the researcher or with participation from the community and train the researcher with support from the technical team, or we call a research assistant from CEPA. And then we start the data collection with identifying the topic and discussion, what we are going to select and what's going to do with the research. But they are focusing on the existing resource or natural resources in their community. Then they have the step of observation and verifying data. They have after they collecting the data, they also discussing within the community with other members to verify the data. For example, about the fish species, we collect the data and the recording, and we capture the picture, and then we also discussing about name, about food, about the location, and where they how the fish living, and also where the fish catch from. And also we after that we also have the consultation meeting with other villages nearby to also to verify those data as well. Then we move to the consultation workshop with participation from technical competent authority, like for example, related to the fishery resources. We invited the fishery administration and to participate to verify the data. Then we compiling the document and publication those documents. So what we recorded and in the finding the case of the fish species, we I raised three cases of the finding from the research where conducted by the community, and also recorded and also published for community use and other key stakeholder use. The first one is the fish species. We have the community found 130 fish species in their community. They in the target community found it, and they also classify those fish species in the abundant fish species, every catch fish species, and endangered fish species, and also the critical fish species. And also they stating about the species are increasing, or the staple species, or the number of the species are declining. And on the right side, it is a data recorded. So in one of the fish species, they record about the fish status, amounts of the fish they catch, how the fish migration, and the size of the fish in average, food that fish food for fish, and where they stay at a fish habitat and spawning season, and location of fish spawning season, location of the fish spawning, and also the fishing gear that can catch those fish. How to use that fish for cooking, for what kind of food, what kind of cook they are used for with that fish, and fish specification, date of fish catch, and local name in English, and also scientific name language. They put the name in the indigenous language. The second one, it is the plant benefit. We also produce a book from the research of the community action research. We also produce a plant book for the community. They have 94 plant species, including 77 for the local medicine, and they 32 species for food consumption, and 5 species for both food and medicine use. The plant was classified into the 4 categories, including wind with the 34 species, and hard trunk tree with the 31 species, and soft stem tree 16 species, and the grass type is the 30 species. And for the data record of the plant, we also give the name of the plant in Khmer language and also local name and the type of the species. Is it a stem or trunk, or is it hard trunk or soft trunk or a soft trunk? And also we look at the identity of the tree or the plant, leaf, the branch, the root, and also the bark. Location where the plant, where the plant is planted or growing, and the benefit or the use of the tree. We can use in food, what kind of food they use, and what use in medicine, and what kind of medicine for human use or for the animal use. So we also stating in this the harnessing or the benefit or the use of the plant, and how to grow that tree or the plant, and the status. We focusing on the status of the plant is abundant or is rare or easy to access or not. Amount exists in the village and they can easy to access in the village or not. The life cycle, we also mentioned the life cycle of each of the plant, whether it in the season, it grow in seasonally or grow in how many years for the life cycle of each of the plant. And also we the business, for the business or not for the business, for so this is the case related to the plant benefit. And for the fish habitat, we also have the community also conducted with the we call fish pool, fish depot, and we have 29 fish depot. The purpose of the research on the fish depot is to see what are the changes in the biology or in the fish habitat in the community. For example, the changes of the water or the changes of the size of the deep pool, or the size, the length, the depth, or the plant growing around the deep pool. So they also recorded in the data, and they also recorded about the plant species or fish species or bird species who are living or nearby the pool, and also how the linkage to the livelihood, the fishing activity. They also mentioned about the fishing activity, seasonal of fishing, and aquatic resource collecting for food, something in the fish habitat. Through this community action research, we found that it has lots of benefits on the natural resource management for a community, and it also improve the participation of the natural resource management at the community level, since they know the specific status of the resource in the community. And the women, they also participated in the community actions. So it is opportunity to have the equal access of information and research activity. And in this research, we also encourage use, because we also have some technology use, like using camera, also shooting video for document of a community, and to join in this action research. And it also builds more confidence and ownership on their resource, since they have know the the status of the resource, and then they can take some action and feel this is the resource, and they join in conservation biodiversity in the community. It also improves the knowledge and skill on natural sources for the new generation, and because they have also recorded and they use the document to share and also discussion and sharing to the community member. The capacity building and sharing knowledge and experience to other villages also through the researcher. They also share the knowledge and experience through the meeting or workshop with other villages, since they verify the data of the fish species or plant species in other village to verify. And it also by use and sale on the natural sources. As they know the status of the fishery and also the species, plant species, so they join and sell the natural sources.
Sorry, Vannak, I would ask you to speed up a bit so that we can have Q&A. Yeah, so maybe
Okay.
I give you another 2 minutes to conclude. Yeah.
Okay. And other through the action research, you also identified some strategy for livelihood activity adaptation to climate change, while the natural sources are being declined in the community. Because we have one of the research also focus on the climate change as well. So community also know how the status and the change the behavior in doing the farming, especially rice farm or animal raising. The data used in the community fishery, the data they collected, they also used in the planning, in community management plan, and also commune investment plan, community development plan, and for the conservation, conserving the depot conservation as well. It's also strengthening the networking among the community and key stakeholders, where we have many forums to meet and consultation with key stakeholders. And how the action community research promote women participation in natural source management. We can say it promoted women's role in the management structure in community-based natural source management. For example, we also have the presence of the women in the management structure of the community fishery management committee. And also some active women also joined in patrolling in the daytime or the standby in the patrolling post and support the patrolling team. They also join the meeting and community development activity. And another important thing is the role of the home educator in natural source management. As the woman at home, they can provide education to the children and also their relatives at home, and take part in decision making in natural source management and planning. For example, in the community fishery management plan, they also take part to have the decision making in the, because in the management plan, they also mentioned about the livelihood activity. The women also select give some boy related to the livelihood they can do, like aquatic culture. Join in the research team and learn and share knowledge to others. The topic research on the food, they also identify the role of men, women, and children to in the collecting food for daily consumption. We have only 2 challenges in the research. It is a majority of people are more recognize the scientific research rather than the community action research, and it needs to take much time to work with the community action research to deliver research skills in collecting and verifying the data recorded. For recommendation, we considering to promote the local partnership for complementary data among academic research and community action research. It should be considered to promote that thing. And the second point is the key finding of the community action research should be taken into account for decision-making process for especially for development project in the community area, particularly the mega projects such as hydropower dam development on the mainstream of the river, as it is one of the key affected to the livelihood on the community who are mostly relying on the fishery resources. So thank you for presentation. That's it. Thank you, Annie.
Thank you, Vannak. Thank you for sharing that community action research that is being done in Cambodia. And I think this is a very unique view to look at how the community is engaged to participate in research, and especially in the governance related to natural resources. And we will dive deeper into to look at specifically, through research action, through earlier the presentation, to see what are these factors that we must consider in order to have the indigenous women role in conserving our agrobiodiversity, that their role are being put at the center of policy making, and also in still maintaining their way of living, their livelihoods. Thank you so much, Vannak. So with this, I would also now look at a number of questions that have been posed, or comments that are being posted and related to the presentation. So let me, because most of the questions are on the chat, right? So that I can see. So I will bring back all the three panelists back, so we can address this. And the first one I see is related to IWNT. I think, Kanlaya, this is related to your work. Very interesting research from IWNT. How could we access to the report? Because this will be also useful to our work, especially when it comes to hybrid seeds. And do you have lesson on how to preserve the local seed for local community? Would you like to look at that, Kanlaya?
Yes, please you repeat the questions again. I could not hear well now. I am in the village now. Sorry.
Okay. So nice. So nice. Okay. This one is related to what can we learn from your experience? Especially looking at the Hmong community, and when monocrop plantation is being introduced to them, and chemical, so because in Laos this is also being done, similar to what is being done to Thailand, in Thailand. So what can our community in Laos take from you, that we can learn from you, especially also when seeds, all these hybrid seeds or modern seed varieties are being introduced? What experience can you share with our Lao community with regards to your experience?
I would say that it's not easy now as indigenous women, as indigenous people in a country where indigenous people's rights and practices are not recognized by the governments. No, I think it's not easy for us, and how to say, and there's not much choices for indigenous people in the countries, and the governments now in the countries should recognize now, to try to understand now the benefits now and the good sides of the traditional agricultural practices now of the people. Otherwise, if you are how to say, enforce new laws into those practices. It would be very difficult for the indigenous people, the local people to continue and also maintain their traditional practices, which is already now there are some proof that it's good for the environment, it's good for the agro-biodiversities. For the case of the Hmong people in Thailand, they have not much choices now. What they did here is try to adapt to the new laws, the new order, new regulation that is enforced by the governments, and try to utilize the knowledge and also the remaining resources that they have now around themselves. Yeah, so I don't know what is good and what could be shared with the people in Laos, but it's very difficult. It's very difficult, and you have to how to say, obey, listen, follow the laws, the order of the central governments. So it's not to say what to be chair, but what I want to say to both the government of Thailand and also Laos, that if we want to preserve, to maintain the agro-biodiversities, we must recognize the role of the indigenous people, especially indigenous women, local women, and their traditional practices. Otherwise, if we don't try to understand their situation, their context, and the knowledge that they have now, then yeah, it's very difficult to keep the biodiversity, agro-biodiversity for our world. Yes, this is what I want to say.
Thank you, Kanlaya. Maybe June can also share from the 4 communities that you work with, what make their traditional farming practices that they can continue to work there. What what is enabling them to continue practicing this? Maybe June, you can highlight also your experience in these 4 communities.
I think the first enabling factor for the traditional farming practices to be sustained is for the community themselves to know that this is important to them. So in the different communities that I presented, so it was really from their initiatives that these traditional practices are revived and are being sustained to be able to provide them the needs, not just, and then at present they have this initiative to have demo farms for indigenous leaders or young indigenous leaders to learn from the practice of their elders and to transmit these practices. And also the women are very active by storing seeds or by gathering traditional seeds, by having these nurseries, establishing seed banks for the community to be shared by the other members of the community.
Thank you, Jude. And maybe Vannak, from your side, when you can looking at this community action research with the information and data that you collect, how can you help to push the rights of indigenous people that they are for us to conserve the role of women and indigenous people? Would you like to add to that, Vannak?
Thank you, Annie, for the question. Based on my experience working with community at the community level, we for the, how we say, in the topic of the selection for the data collection is to identify the participation from the indigenous or the women or the participation participation to select the topic, and also we identify how this topic is important and benefit to the livelihood, how it's linked to the livelihood, and what are they going to focus on the crop or the plant or the fish species in order to know how it benefit, how it's better, and then they can use this kind of benefit and share to the other members in order to improve the understanding of the benefit, and also they thinking about the future or the sustainability of the use of the resource. And so that's why they also said after they collecting the data, they also identify and verify and is the data correct or not, and then what they are going to do next for the data. So this is what my side contribution. Thank you.
Yeah, I think from what we can hear, first to strengthen this democratic process, I think Vannak mentioned that, and June have mentioned that it first must come from the people themselves, that you have to demand for or to push that your rights have been seen. And I think in many of the in a number of ASEAN countries, we are also linked to a lot of international convention. I know a few, some of the countries are not into the social, economic, and cultural rights, but we also would want to see that indigenous people's rights are being put forth. I think June mentioned a lot of this, and for government to recognize that our way of life, yeah, this is something that must be seen. And I think earlier Kanlaya and scientific from the agricultural farming perspective, so this for me also, I find it very disturbing that policymakers or that they see our way of shifting agriculture or slash and burn, they see this as damaging, yeah, and this is misconception that have to be that we have to correct, yeah, because there is traditional knowledge that is related to why we are doing that. Yeah, I know, for example, from my culture, we do shifting because we want to allow the land to recuperate. So later we will come back to that. Yeah, so this is something that I think people, first thing is really look at this factor of misunderstanding about our way of life, and then look at how the governance space, yeah, allow us to project our voice. And this is what I think earlier that Cynthia was also talking about. Thank you for putting that in. There's also another one from Simon. Agrobiodiversity laws. There are many. Are there any problem regarding local knowledge transferring to new generation among minority ethnic groups in Thailand? This is going to you, Kanlaya. The local knowledge transfer to new generation. Do we see a big gap here? Is there a problem among the Hmong or other ethnic minorities in Thailand?
Yes, thank you for the questions. And I think this is very good questions and very important to address this. Yeah, because as you may aware now that especially in Thailand, all the educational curriculum, it's how to say, designed, by the central governments, by the central governments, by the Ministry of Education, and without any consultation from the local communities. And yeah, and this what I would like to say here is that this kind of education, has very big impacts now, affects now the way of life now, and especially the transfer of knowledge, now transmission of knowledge now to the younger generations, because in our communities now we live high up in the mountain, and there are distance now from village to another village. So in many communities there's no school, no, meaning the kids have to go to other village, no, or even sometimes go to the cities, go to the town for studies, no, for their education. So when the kids are gone, no, and leaving only the parents and the elders back in the village, no, there's no way, no, for the transmission, the transferring of the knowledge, no, traditional knowledge to the younger generations. The biggest challenge for us now in Thailand, especially now, is the loss of our traditional knowledge due to the there's no linkages now. There's no linkages between the younger generation and the older generation, the one who have the knowledge, who hold the knowledge, and the younger generation who gonna be our the members of our communities now, in the future. So this this will definitely now and already now affecting our communities now in transferring this knowledge to the younger generation. So yes, I would again I would like to stress here that in deciding now what kind of education to be given to the people now, especially the local people, the indigenous people now, there should be consultation now with the people there also now, so that it's fits with the context now, and also fits with the indigenous community now, the people themselves now. It's not a good solution to taking these young people away now. And yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kanlaya. And June, this brings me to your faith group, your youth movement with the food always in the home. I think this initiative. How can we engage youth in this regard? I think this also help to see knowledge transfer. Could you elaborate on that?
Yes, so this food always in the home is specific to the Romano Nimenovo community, and it is an initiative of both the women and youth. So I would also like to contribute in how to, and the question directed to Kanlaya a while ago, on how to ensure that indigenous peoples or the youth are able to acquire the traditional knowledge that are passed on by the elders. So in the Philippines, there were no experience for indigenous youth since most of them are very interested to learn their traditions or their cultures. But we have experienced that the indigenous leaders would be hesitant to pass on their traditional knowledge. So there were those experiences on that. And also in the government, the national government has this indigenous people's education, a culture-sensitive education program, which aims to ensure that the younger generation are able to learn the traditions or the culture within their territories. Thank you.
Thank you, June. I will take one more question, and this one is to Mr. Vannak. Dr. Elisabeth is sharing this question with you. So women have been engaged a lot in your work, yeah, and youth. And how could you share how some experiences, how you ensure that they don't get overloaded with additional work? Yeah, so this again, because I was also curious to know what specific role does this women play in your community action research? So can you share that? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Annie. Thank you, Elisabeth, for the question. It's from the Elisabeth, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so this is the question also in mind in my working as well. When we are starting to work and promote women in the community, we are thinking about the question like Elisabeth raised, and does it making workload to the community, to the women in the community, as for example in the community fishery management. We also consider, we encourage women to participation in the natural resource management, for example, like fishery resource management. But we also safeguarding by setting up the role, the specific roles of the women through we have the community management committee. They selected with select at least women two member among 7 people to take part in the community fishery management. However, the roles of the women is on the we see the more effective is on the dissemination and also the management of pests, pest management. So we discussing about the role and promote the women to take that kind of role as they are, for example, the pest management. The women it is more effective and they also patient and they patient and also take care of the pest. And dissemination, as I mentioned in the presentation, also about women is the effective home educator for natural resource management, because they always normally they are always with the children, and they can provide, they have a good opportunity to give the good advice to the kids, the children on the how the natural resource management. With the women, they learn from the community fishery management committee. So in order to avoid the workload of the women, I think one thing is to also to provide the capacity building on the gender concept to the community management committee, include men and women come together in order to know the gap of the women and how to complement to each other in the community management committee. For example, in the patrolling I mentioned is they not women need to patrol at the night time because they need they can rotate role in the at the daytime, but not always, but just only some of the women they be active in the conservation. They stand by at the daytime, but they don't go and or we say a dry boat, or not. They just have support manage we say the center with prepare food for the men to patrol around the community, but they stand by in a place. So this is the role that been discussed among the committee and give some tasks to the women to participate in the conservation. So thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Vannak. Okay, with that, I would like to wrap up this session and just to look again into what I think to summarize, I just would like to stress on 3 key factors that would help to move our move the role of women and indigenous people as the custodian of agrobiodiversity. Firstly, this role must be from the community themselves, that they are willing to go forward to also continue to with this in keeping with their cultural and tradition. We know that a lot of the youth today are shy, or they don't want to be associated to be known as indigenous people. I think this kind of mentality involving, so we have to change our approach with the youth so that they feel proud to be part of this, our community, these indigenous people, and being in the center of agrobiodiversity. Secondly, we must look at the government, the role of government to continue to provide space. Yeah, I think earlier the voice, our voice must be heard. This is something that we should continue to engage and look for the space. And we know that in various platforms there is already mechanism for this, but probably it's not rightly engaged with. So this is something that we really need to see who are the players or who are our representative to this kind of platform to make sure that our voice is heard. And lastly, of course, I would like to also again look at the youth side, and also this is, I mentioned the first. The third one is to look at what factors motivate women and indigenous community to stay on. Is there economic value that we can look at? Yeah? For example, that it was mentioned on community seed. We conserve seeds, but is there economic and social benefit that can be seen that at least you know, when it comes to access and benefit sharing, at the end of the day, when it comes to CBD, how does access and benefit sharing transferred into our community? We know that a lot of these biological resources has been extracted out, but the community is not rightfully paid. The same thing with ABD. When we keep this as a custodian, when we look at the payment of ecosystem services, that we leave our, you know, we provide like landscape management, we do not disturb certain forests, yeah? So are we getting paid for these services? And this role have to be recognized. Yeah, so this is, you know, so that we can continue, the women can continue with their traditional knowledge on how to keep the agrobiodiversity in place. Okay, so with that, I would really like to thank our three panelists today. Thank you very much for your insightful presentation and sharing. Thank you, Ms. Kanlaya Chularattakorn. Thank you, Ms. June. Thank you, Mr. Vannak, for this very insightful session that I have. So I look forward, and those questions that we are not able to answer, I hope that we can address them in plenary discussion later. Sorry. Okay. Okay. So with that, I close this session, and thank you so much. And I pass it back to Ratna. Thank you.
Thank you, Annie. Thank you, everyone. Thank you also for the wrap up. I think there will be time for better increased engagement during the 3 p.m. session, where we will consolidate all the inputs that we received from day 1 and day 2, and also show you what are the inputs and considerations going forward from this forum, which will be up for discussion during the session. So we invite you to stay for that session as well, which will take place after the 3rd panel session for today. So we will gather back here at 1 p.m. How about 1?
So no lunch for everyone.
No lunch for everyone. Okay, 1:15. 1:15.
Yeah.
1:15 p.m. So that we can have a quick lunch and come back. All right. So 1:15 Bangkok time, GMT +7.
Hi, Suryan.
Thank you, everyone. We'll see you at 1:15.
Thank you. See you.
Thank you, Annie. Thank you.
Okay.
Recording stopped.